Chapter 396. Did they really think that the immortal Tao and the devil Tao could coexist peacefully? However, this is also a good thing. After this, the celestial sect of wonders owes me a favor. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen suddenly smiled. Although he had completely offended the demon sect, because of this matter, he had also gained a favor from the Xian sect. Overall, the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. Instead of concentrating on cultivating in the chaos outside the heavens, Zhu Qing of the demonic sect risked his life and sneaked back to the untainted land to hide. There was no need to think too much to know that there was definitely a conspiracy. Furthermore, the fiend sect's conspiracy was either targeted at the primordial world or the mystic sect. Now, Feng Zichen pulled the devil out. No matter what the demon sect's plan was, it would be considered a failure. Under the surveillance of the experts of the mystic sect, even fiend ancestor Rahu could not stir up any waves in the primordial chaos, much less a half-step primordial chaos fiend. However, if that devil had not been discovered by Feng Zichen, with the devil sect's ability to stir up trouble, he would not have been able to escape. Primordial world. In other words, it was the profound sect. That would be troublesome. If he discovered them in advance, he would be able to stop his losses in advance, and he might even be able to counter the evil sect. As such, the Xian sect naturally owed Feng Zichen a favor. As for the price of offending the demonic sect, it was nothing compared to gaining a favor from the Xian sect. In the end, this world belonged to the celestial sect of wonders. In comparison, the demon sect was just a loser, a stray dog. So what if he offended him? Needless to say, Feng Zichen had a feud with the demon sect many years ago. Now he had even refined demon ancestor Raha's supreme treasure, the Stupa Pagoda, into the 18 levels of hell. It could be said that they had formed a deadly feud. Therefore, when facing the demon sect, his interests were aligned with those of the Xian sect. Whatever the demon gate wanted to do, it was always right for them to destroy it. He watched as the 6 sages headed to the chaos beyond the heavens to track down the demonic path's titans. Feng Zichen knew that even if the sage could not catch up, the devil would not be able to appear in the primordial world for the time being. Therefore, he no longer paid attention to the primordial world and focused his attention on the 18 levels of hell. At this moment, the 18 layers of hell had been completely born. They were shaped like inverted pagodas. One layer after another, they extended towards the depths of the netherworld realm, towards the bottom of the 9 underworlds. That hell was incomparably deep, and the deeper one went, the darker it became. There was no light at all, and it was extremely horrifying. A strange aura pervaded the air. Furthermore, the periphery of the infernal realm was shrouded in a dark red light, which was abnormally ferocious. It was formed from the baleful aura of heaven and earth, and it could corrode everything. It could prevent outsiders from getting close to hell, and it could also prevent evil spirits from escaping. It was the first layer of defense of hell. In the infernal realm, there were countless torture platforms with all sorts of torture instruments on them. There was a rich variety of torture instruments, which summed up all the torture methods of the great desolate Aeon. It was very frightening. The 18 levels of hell were different from the 18 levels of hell. In later generations, the 18 levels of hell created by the Buddhists were not divided according to levels, but according to different types of crimes. Depending on the sins one committed, one would enter different hells. Therefore, the 18 levels of hell of the Buddhist sect did not have a hierarchy and were completely equal. However, Feng Zichen's 18 levels of hell were different. His hell completely followed the idea that the deeper the sin, the greater the suffering. Therefore, each level of hell was more terrifying than the last. Of the 18 levels of hell set up by the Buddhist sect, Feng Zichen only took a fancy to the number and name of the 18 levels. The rest were nothing to him. After all, the philosophy of the Buddhist sect they did not cultivate in this life, but focused on the next life. It was really unpleasant. Therefore, Feng Zichen made changes to the 18 levels of hell. He integrated the hell set up by the Taoist sect in the future into it. For example, the Tendon Hanging Prison, the Yuang Prison, the Fire Pit Prison, the Fengdu Prison, the Blood Pool Prison, the Skinning Prison, and so on. It made the 18 levels of hell even more terrifying. The 18 levels of hell did not represent 18 tortures, but 18 worlds. There were thousands of tortures in them, and they were all unimaginably cruel. Otherwise, how could they intimidate the common people? Moreover, the hell set up by Feng Zichen could extract the origin of ghosts on every level. The mistakes made by all living beings were both big and small. Naturally, they could not stay in hell forever to be punished. Once the sentence was over, they would naturally reincarnate. However, the sentence was not easy to control. Feng Zichen might as well not set a sentence. He would directly let hell extract its origin. When its origin was exhausted, the sentence would be considered over. This way, he could save a lot of manpower and strengthen the origin of hell. It could be said that he could kill several birds with one stone. In this way, the 18 levels of hell have been established. I hope that all living beings will remember the immortal Tao of Ascension, the noble Tao of Reincarnation, the filial Tao of Reincarnation, the fair Tao of Reincarnation, the virtuous Tao of Reincarnation, and the vicious Hell. In the future, if you want to become an immortal and attain the Tao, you still need to cultivate more merit. Looking at the 18 levels of hell, Feng Zichen suddenly moved. He used the great Tao mantra again to persuade all living beings to be good. The fundamental purpose of hell was to warn all living beings and make them be good to heaven and earth. Even pulling people into hell to be punished was to deter all living beings in the primordial world. It was not to punish for the sake of punishment. This was the foundation of hell. It could not be messed up. Otherwise, hell's foundation would be unstable, and it would be in danger of being overturned at any time. Don't deceive your heart in life. Who will be spared by the gods and ghosts? Good and evil will be repaid in the end. It's only a matter of time. In the end, Feng Zichen even composed a song for all living beings to remember in their hearts and recite at all times. As soon as Feng Zichen finished speaking, a gust of cold wind suddenly blew in the primordial world, blowing on all living beings. It was eerie. It was as if an evil ghost was whispering in their ears, causing them to involuntarily recall their trip to hell. Their bodies could not help but tremble in fear. We never forget His Majesty the Ghost Emperor's words. Immense fear assaulted them. All living beings hurriedly knelt on the ground and shouted in a trembling voice. For a moment, the might of the Ghost Emperor of Fengdu intimidated the primordial world. No, I was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Suddenly, several shrill screams sounded in the primordial world. The 18 levels of hell were established. The evil spirits that had been captured earlier immediately appeared in the void and fell into hell. They first experienced the torture of the first 17 levels of hell before falling into the pitch-black infernal purgatory. These screams were emitted by the evil spirits who could not withstand the torture. Of course, this scene was projected in the primordial world. It allowed all living beings to see it clearly. Hiss! Seeing this scene, all living beings could not help but feel a chill from the depths of their souls. Their bodies trembled even more violently. This, fellow Taoist Fengdu, isn't this 18 levels of hell too ferocious? It's against the harmony of the heavens. At the side, the Empress of Earth could not help but feel sympathy for the living beings when she saw this scene. She sent a voice transmission to Feng Zichen. Empress, if all living beings are good, these 18 levels of hell are just decorations. How can there be a violation of the harmony of the heavens? If all living beings are evil, these 18 levels of hell will punish evil spirits. They deserve it. Only then can they show the fairness of the heavenly Tao. Shaking his head, Feng Zichen replied, "If they were good, this hell naturally had nothing to do with them. There was no need to care. Those who feared hell were mostly those who harbored evil intentions. The appearance of hell was to warn these people and make them dispel the evil intentions in their hearts." Sigh. After sighing, the Empress of Earth did not say anything else. She naturally understood such a simple logic. However, seeing all living beings like this, she could not help but feel sorry for them. This was a result of their personality. If they wanted to change it, it would not be a one-time effort. Boom, boom, boom! As the evil spirits entered the infernal purgatory, wisps of black gas surged out from the depths of hell and merged with the 9 dragons' emperor robe on Feng Zichen's body, increasing his power by little. This was the magical effect of this treasure. It could become stronger with the strength of hell. Freeze! Forming a seal with one hand, Feng Zichen pointed at the 18 levels of hell. With a loud sound, the hell slowly sank until it was level with the ground of the first level of hell. All right, in that case, it looks much more pleasing to the eye. As hell sank into the ground, the terrifying phenomena in the surroundings disappeared one by one. Although this place still looked terrifying, it was far less terrifying than before. After doing all this, Feng Zichen raised his head and looked at the sky. There, the origin of hell still existed. Even though the 18 levels of hell were born, it did not exhaust all of its strength. However, the origin of hell was much smaller than before. It was about a quarter of its original size. Moreover, its color had also changed. It had changed from pitch black to pure white. The aura of death and sin on its body had also been replaced by a huge aura of life and holy aura. Although the size of the origin of hell was smaller, its power seemed to be stronger and purer. Thinking about it, the origin of hell was already dense in the beginning. With the addition of the pagoda, the origin of hell was even denser. The birth of the 18 levels of hell consumed the power of the pagoda. The origin of hell did not consume much. It was normal for there to be some left behind. As for the change from black to white and the change in aura, that was the principle of the cycle of heaven and earth. Extreme yang gave birth to yin, and extreme yin gave birth to yang. All things in the world, most of them could not escape this law. Life and death were the same. If the end of life was death, then the end of death was life. After fusing with the pagoda, the aura of death of the origin of hell reached its limit. It automatically gave birth to the aura of life and occupied the center. When the aura of death completely transformed into the 18 levels of hell, the aura of life was no longer concealed and was naturally exposed. Good stuff! Looking at the white ball of light in front of him, Feng Zichen revealed an infatuated expression. This was the origin of life, the origin of creation. It was a true primordial treasure. It was a treasure even more precious than the Daluo Dao fruit. Even if a quasi-sage swallowed it, there would be endless benefits. In an instant, Feng Zichen felt several gazes fall on him. No, it was the origin of hell. Those were the greedy gazes of a group of powerful beings outside the netherworld realm. This item's origin was too dense. It was not inferior to the connate origin of a quasi-sage at the peak of the quasi-sage realm. It was a supreme creation. If they could snatch it and refine it, they might be able to take a step closer and glimpse into the mysteries of the primordial chaos Dao realm. With this thought in mind, everyone could not help but be tempted. Even a few powerful beings at the late stage of the quasi-sage realm subconsciously clench their hands, eager to give it a try. The lower their realm, the more they desired the origin of hell, because, when their realm was high, the origin of hell was of little use to them. It might not be able to help them break through. However, it was different for cultivators with low realms. The origin of hell could definitely help them take a step closer. Therefore, they had an incomparable desire for the origin of hell. Their gazes towards the origin of hell became passionate. They were like evil spirits who had not eaten for many days and suddenly saw delicious food. When their gazes fell on Feng Zichen, they felt a tingling pain. At this moment, there was no doubt that if it were not for the Hutu and the group of powerful beings present, those who coveted the origin of hell would definitely rush into the netherworld realm and tear Feng Zichen apart to seize the origin of hell. Good boy. There are so many experts. This item must not be left behind. Sensing the spying of many powerful beings, Feng Zichen immediately made a decision. The origin of hell must not be left behind. As the saying went, one was not afraid of thieves stealing, but one was afraid of thieves thinking about it. If he accepted the origin of hell, those powerful beings would probably target him and think of ways to snatch the origin of hell from him. Just thinking about this kind of situation was scary. Who could sleep soundly if they were targeted by dozens of late-stage quasi-sages or even higher existences? Therefore, the origin of hell could not be left behind. This was the source of trouble. I was really careless. At this moment, Feng Zichen could not help but secretly blame himself. He was so complacent that he forgot to hide the origin of hell in advance, exposing it to the public and attracting everyone's attention. If not for that, he would have secretly hidden the origin of hell and no one would have known. Sigh. Thinking of this, Feng Zichen sighed again and again. It would be better for him to hide such a good thing and slowly refine it to improve his cultivation. He was really muddle-headed. He even forgot to reveal his wealth. However, at this point, it was useless to think too much. It was better to think of a way to make up for it. Open. Closing his eyes, Feng Zichen mobilized all the mana in his body. With Panga's method, when he split open the sky, he slashed at the origin of hell. Rumble. Instantly, the origin of hell was shattered. Yin and Yang were opened and creation was born. Endless rules were manifested, and a world was gradually born, splitting heaven and earth. This was the method that Feng Zichen thought of. He really couldn't bear to give away the origin of hell. Why should he give away his own treasure? He might as well use this as the foundation to continue to evolve the world and completely consume the origin of hell. In this way, the origin of hell would be gone. No matter how much everyone coveted the origin of hell, they couldn't go to the netherworld and take away a world. Right? Feng Zichen expressed. He was very willing for everyone to do this. In that case, it wouldn't be Feng Zichen who dealt with them, but the will of the netherworld that was comparable to a saint. Open, open, open. Then, Feng Zichen used his finger as a sword and waved it 5 times at the origin of hell before he stopped. 5 dazzling sword lights flew out of his hand with boundless Taoist rhymes. They slashed the newborn world and divided it into 6 pieces. Rumble. The rules of heaven and earth changed because of this, turning from 1 world into 6 worlds. Fengdu 6 days. What Feng Zichen wanted to do was to open up Fengdu 6 days. It was rumored that there were 6 heavens above Fengdu, Luo Mountain. The Emperor of Fengdu set up 6 heavenly palaces here as the headquarters to manage and test ghosts. Among them, there were 6 heavenly ghosts and gods. As the subordinates of the Emperor of Fengdu, they were to protect the supreme dignity of the ghost emperor. Chapter 397. Turning 1 into 6. Although the area of the world had become smaller, but correspondingly, the speed of its derivation had undoubtedly increased greatly. In less than 100 years, the vast and boundless sky of the 6 directions appeared in the sky above Fengdu Luo Mountain, which was the highest point of the netherworld. Boom! The moment the 6 heavens were born in the primordial world, above the 9 heavens, Zhouxing shone brightly. Streams of origin power drooped down and poured into the netherworld. One could see that. After the starlight fell into the netherworld, it merged with the source of extreme Yin, forming the shadows of dim stars that appeared in the sky above the netherworld. First, the great sun appeared and hung in the sky. The sky was pitch black, but it strangely emitted light, illuminating the dark netherworld. That was the sun of the underworld. The essence of the sun fell into the netherworld and ignited the source of extreme Yin, reaching the point of extreme Yin giving birth to Yang, turning into a dark sun. This was the only Yang in the netherworld. It was also the hope of ghost cultivators to become immortals. Ghosts were formed from Yin Qi. If one wanted to become an immortal and attain the Tao, one had to remove all the Yin Qi in one's body and turn Yin into Yang. And the sun of the underworld was formed from Yang Qi. Bathed in its light, one's cultivation speed would undoubtedly be greatly accelerated. This was a supreme treasure for ghost cultivators. After the sun, a faint moon appeared. It was cold and cheerless, dotted with a few wisps of light, releasing an oppressive cold air. This was the moon of the underworld. After the essence of the sun fell into the netherworld, it merged with the source of extreme Yin, forming a bright moon. It contained the purest innate extreme Yin Qi. It was of great benefit to cultivators who had just entered the ghost path or cultivators who specialized in the path of extreme Yin. After it, specks of starlight appeared and floated in the sky, flashing. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to notice it at all. This was the projection of Zhouxing. They were far less powerful than the sun and moon, and they didn't have anything to rely on in the netherworld. Therefore, after coming to the netherworld, they could only turn into specks of starlight to announce their existence. Rumble! The sun and moon were born, and the projection of Zhouxing appeared. The netherworld shook and became more stable and perfect. I didn't expect that there would be such benefits in opening Fengdu for 6 days. Seeing the changes in front of him, Feng Zichen could not help but feel a little surprised. He had opened up the 6 heavens of Fengdu in a hurry. He had not expected that their appearance would cause the netherworld to be further perfected. This was truly a pleasant surprise. Di Jun. Suddenly, Feng Zichen's face turned cold. He gritted his teeth and shouted a name. Zhouxing's phantoms had all appeared, but only the Emperor's star projection that symbolized the Ghost Emperor was missing. How could he not be angry? The purple star was sealed by Di Jun and could not manifest in the great, desolate Yin. Naturally, it was even more impossible for it to manifest in the underworld realm. Just as Feng Zichen was getting angry, the 6 heavens of Fengdu changed again. Buzz, buzz, buzz. One of the heavens suddenly trembled slightly as it began to absorb the tribulation aura, baleful aura, evil aura, and so on. What happened? The sudden change woke Feng Zichen up from his anger. He looked at the 6 heavens of Fengdu in front of him in surprise and bewilderment. Why should he care about Di Jun? He could not be arrogant for more than a few days. Moreover, it was useless, even if he cared. He could not defeat Di Jun. Now, it was more important to care about the matter in front of him. This is looking at the sky that was crazily absorbing evil aura. Feng Zichen's heart stirred slightly. He vaguely understood something. The 6 heavens of Fengdu had their own uses. One of the heavens was the place where the evil god lived. This evil god did not refer to the ghost god who did all kinds of evil, but the ghost god who arranged the plague to cause the great calamity. The netherworld realm had a high status, and only the 18 levels of hell could not show its might. Therefore, the evil god was born because of this. If the atmosphere of the human world was bad, and they took evil as glory and good as disaster, the netherworld realm's ruler, Emperor Fengdu, who lived in the Yin Mountain, would feel it and expel the ghost god to the human world. Or it would cause war, or it would spread the plague, it would cause the world to be in chaos. Killing to stop killing, violence to cure violence, purge heaven and earth, and rebuild order. It would show the majesty of the Emperor Feng, the Yin court has not appeared, but the authority of the Emperor Feng has already begun to manifest. Is it so urgent? After thinking it through, Feng Zichen muttered. Without thinking, he knew that the only person in the netherworld who could guide the changes of the 6 heavens of Fengdu under his nose was the will of the netherworld. It seemed that the netherworld had been holding back for a long time. As soon as it appeared in the world, it could not wait to show its presence. Feng Zichen also understood the thoughts of the will of the netherworld. Look, as his brother, the heaven realm, had already become the center of the power of the primordial world. Looking at him, he had just been born. If he did not do a few things that would cause a sensation in the primordial world, how could he compete with the heaven realm? Wouldn't he be weaker than the heaven realm? Therefore, he even took the initiative to guide the changes of the netherworld to increase his right to speak in the primordial world. However, by doing so, the will of the netherworld completely messed up Feng Zichen's plan of low-key development. He had originally planned to open up the 6 heavens of Fengdu and use it to nurture his team. When the Ghost Path had some experts to support him, he would participate in the battle for the primordial world to establish the supreme position of the netherworld. But now the netherworld did not give Feng Zichen a chance to develop at all. It directly let him join the battle for the primordial world to seize the power of heaven and earth. F***CK. At this moment, Feng Zichen really wanted to curse. The netherworld had just been born. It had no people or things. He was a commander without an army. What could he use to compete with the demons and the heaven realm? By relying on his head? If he did not leave the netherworld, he could still protect himself. Once he left the netherworld, he probably did not need Dijun to make a move. Just one of the 10 great demon gods of the demon race would be able to blast his incarnation into pieces. Therefore, the will of the netherworld was completely forcing him. Wait, not at all. Hichin could not. The Empress of Earth, the Magi, could also do it. With a thought, Feng Zichen had an idea. However, this matter was not urgent. He had to deal with the matter in front of him first. After the 6 heavens of Fengdu had finished evolving, the origin of hell was still not exhausted. However, there was only a little bit left. It was of great use to Daluo Jinxian, but its effect on the saint was minimal. Therefore, when they saw the current appearance of the origin of hell, those prying gazes immediately disappeared. Phew! Sensing this, Feng Zichen could not help but heave a sigh of relief. He really could not feel at ease being remembered by so many powerful figures. After all, no matter how strong his strength was, his essence was still Daluo Jinxian. Therefore, he did not intend to leave behind such a small amount of the origin of hell. Go. As he spoke, Feng Zichen waved his hand and sent the small ball of the origin of hell into the ground of Een Mountain, fusing with the origin of Een Mountain. Immediately, under Een Mountain, a magical world was slowly born. That was Fengdu Hell. As everyone knew, there were 19 levels of hell. This Fengdu Hell was the legendary 19th level of hell. Those who were powerful and wreaked havoc in the world would be imprisoned in Fengdu Hell and would never be reincarnated. That's right, it was a human, not a ghost. This was a hell specially targeted at Daluo Jinxian. As long as there was a Daluo Jinxian wreaking havoc in the primordial world, the great emperor of Fengdu could suppress him in Fengdu Hell and never be able to escape until the primordial world was destroyed. Although the 18 levels of hell were strong, in theory, they could suppress Daluo Jinxian. However, it was a hell targeted at the dead. How could Daluo Jinxian die? He would not die. How could he suppress Daluo Jinxian? Therefore, this was a paradox that could never be realized. This was the birth of Fengdu Hell. In Fengdu Hell, there was no trace of pre-celestial qi, no rules of heaven and earth, and no concept of time and space. There was only endless silence and despair. There was also endless darkness. This place was infinitely close to nothingness. Only such an environment could suppress Daluo Jinxian. Otherwise, with Daluo Jinxian's strength as long as there was a trace of rules. He could use this as a basis to forcefully break through the world and escape. Phew! Only then can hell be considered a problem. Seeing that everything was on the right track, Feng Zichen heaved a sigh of relief. After working for so long, he had finally opened up hell completely. This also meant that it was time to reap the harvest. Rumble. In the sky, the gaze of the heavenly Tao appeared. The black and yellow merit gathered. It surged towards Feng Zichen in a mighty manner. Although the merit obtained from opening up hell was far inferior to the merit obtained from turning the earth into reincarnation, it was still about 10%. It was almost comparable to the merit obtained from establishing the three pure ones. Speaking of which, the merit obtained from establishing the three pure ones was actually not much. If one were to really talk about it, the amount of merit could not even be ranked in the top 10 of the primordial world. They could become saints. It was said that they became saints by establishing a sect, but in fact it was not. They relied on the merit of opening the heavens to become saints. The so-called merit of establishing a sect was just a primer to open the merit of opening the heavens. If not, why was the strength of the three pure ones stronger than Zhu and Ti when they both established a sect to become saints? It was because the way the two became saints was completely different. Boom! Merit entered the body. Feng Zichen's cultivation was soaring. This time, he did not refuse to use merit to increase his cultivation. He was not worried about the possible hidden dangers at all. That was because the Emperor Feng Du was only an incarnation. Using merit to increase his cultivation did not affect his main body at all. He could also use this opportunity to see the pros and cons of using merit to increase his cultivation. In that case, how could Feng Zichen not do it? The reincarnation merit that he had obtained earlier, plus the hell merit that he had obtained now, Feng Zichen did not hold back at all. He took them all out to increase his cultivation. Next, Feng Zichen's cultivation began to soar. Daluo Jingxian was in the middle stage. Daluo Jingxian was in the late stage. Daluo Jingxian was in the great perfection. The early stage of the quasi-saint, the middle stage of the quasi-saint, the late stage of the quasi-saint. In a short moment, with the help of merit, Feng Zichen's cultivation advanced from the early stage of the Daluo Jingxian to the late stage of the quasi-saint, becoming a great magician. Only then did he stop the momentum of his advancement. However, the remaining merit was not enough to advance him to the level of the great perfection of the quasi-saint. Even so, it was shocking enough. Although the quasi-saint and Daluo Jingxian were in the same realm, they were two completely different existences. The former had already begun to transcend the river of time and space, while the latter was still struggling in the river of time and space. The difference was obvious at a glance. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. What is that? Originally, everyone thought that it was over, but they didn't expect that the changes weren't over yet. They saw an origin suddenly droop down from the tunnel, forcefully twisting Feng Zichen's foundation, turning the earth flower on his head into an earth flower. For a moment, Feng Zichen's body changed again. Although his realm didn't increase, his aura was much stronger. He also had the temperament of the Lord of all things, transcending the gods and boundless majesty. Today, the great magicians of the primordial world saw a scene that surprised them. A Taoist priest who had just entered the Daluo Jingxian had crossed 5 small realms and 1 big realm in a short moment, becoming a great magician of the late stage of the quasi-saint. Moreover, he had also bloomed the only 2 earth flowers of the primordial world. It was unheard of and unseen. His cultivation speed was so fast that it could be said to be the best in the primordial world. It was enough to be recorded in the primordial world's history books and be admired by future generations. Fast! Too fast! This was the only thought in everyone's mind. What a great creation! However, How much of his strength can he unleash if he doesn't have the experience to match up to his cultivation base? Everyone was first shocked by the speed of Feng Zichen's advancement. Then, they couldn't help but think of the drawbacks of doing so. It didn't seem like a big problem to use merit to increase one or two small realms. However, it was the first time in the primordial world that Feng Zichen crazily used merit to increase his cultivation base. The strength of one's strength came from the origin, realm, and experience. The origin represented the upper limit of one's magic power. The more profound it was, the more powerful one's magic power was. The realm represented the control of the great Tao and the rules. The more profound it was, the greater its influence on the world. Experience was combat experience. The more abundant it was, the more control one had over oneself. One could often exert the greatest advantage at the smallest price. Therefore, in order to fully exert one's strength, all three were indispensable. However, merit could only increase one's cultivation base by one's realm and nothing else. This was like a child suddenly possessing the strength of an adult. He was strong and could be said to be invincible among children, but could he be a match for a normal adult? Obviously he couldn't. This was Feng Zichen's current situation. If he had the corresponding cultivation realm, but not the corresponding strength, any quasi-sage primary stage expert would be able to compete with him. Oh, not necessarily. After all, Feng Zichen had bloomed the flower of the earth. His strength should be a little stronger. As expected, using merit to increase one's cultivation base isn't as simple as I thought. In fact, just as the great magicians had guessed, Feng Zichen's current situation was more or less like this. His realm was at the late stage of the quasi-saint realm, but his innate origin was still at the level of Daluo Jingxian without the slightest increase. The experience from Daluo Jingxian to the late stage of the quasi-saint realm was completely blank, and it didn't help him at all. Compared to before, his strength lay in the fact that his influence on the world was even deeper, his mastery of the great Tao and the rules was even more at will. Strong, much stronger than before. If the current Feng Zichen were to deal with the previous him, it could be said that he could suppress him effortlessly. Chapter 398. However, if he were to face an expert of the same level, the situation would be completely reversed. He would probably be easily suppressed. The strength that was increased by merit was the lowest among the same realm. This was not a lie. Even the saints were the same. The saints who became saints with the method of merit were the weakest saints. This was personally said by Tao ancestor Hongjun. It could not be false. In the future, if the incarnation of Fengdu fought with others, he could only rely on his realm to suppress it. It would be difficult for him to lose against Daluo Jingxian as a quasi-saint. With Feng Zichen's current situation, he could only show off in front of Daluo Jingxian. If he showed off in front of a quasi-saint, he might fail. However, this was the netherworld. The strength he could unleash was far from what he was showing now. With the origin of hell, he could unleash strength comparable to a perfected quasi-saint. With the origin of the netherworld, he could unleash strength comparable to Daluo Jingxian. This was the benefit of the karmic rank. He was almost invincible in the netherworld. It seems that I have to cultivate well from now on. Feeling the weak origin in his body, Feng Zichen was a little distressed. Experience was something that relied on the accumulation of experience. It was impossible to achieve great results in a short period of time. However, there were many ways to quickly grow the innate origin other than painstakingly condensing it. However, these methods required the consumption of a large number of precious innate treasures, especially the innate origin that could increase the late stage of the quasi-saint realm. Its value was comparable to a high-grade innate spirit treasure. Destroying a high-grade innate spirit treasure just to increase the origin of the Fengdu incarnation? Feng Zichen felt that he was not so prodigal or rich. Fengdu incarnation should cultivate by himself. At the same time, he could recomprehend every realm to increase his experience and make up for his shortcomings. Anyway, he had nothing to do now. Instead of being idle, he might as well cultivate. Before the end of the great Magi Demon War, the thing that Fengdu incarnation lacked the most was time. However, there was no rush. Now, the netherworld had appeared. The most important thing was to suggest the Yin Court. The heavens had the heavenly court, which managed the immortals and controlled the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. On earth, there should be an underworld court that governs all ghosts and controls life, death, misfortune, and fortune. Only when the heavens and earth were in balance was the truth of the great Tao. Having made up his mind, Feng Zichen turned around and walked toward Hutu. He wanted to talk to her about establishing the Yin Court. After all, he didn't have the strength, the soldiers, or the food. It was impossible for him to establish the Yin Court by himself. Not to mention whether the great mystical abilities of the primordial world were convinced or not. Just the heavenly court's attack was enough for him to suffer. Primordial world. There was a shaman. This was enough for the demons to worry about. If another Yin Court appeared, it would be better than fighting for power. Wouldn't the demon race explode? Dong Huang would probably be able to turn Feng Zichen and the Yin Court he had established into dust once he struck the bell of chaos. The demon race would never tolerate the existence of the Yin Court. Therefore, if the Yin Court wants to be established, it had to be the sorcerer tribe. Only the Yin Court established by the Magi could not be afraid of the demons and shock the primordial world. At the same time, the Yao didn't dare to rashly attack the Yin Court. Moreover, the netherworld was the backup plan that Pangu had prepared for the Magi. It was only natural for them to establish the Yin Court. In addition, Feng Zichen was a Magi of the Magi. He naturally had to live up to his identity and plan for the future of the Magi. Although establishing the Yin Court could not change the fate of the Magi, it could protect the Magi who remained in the netherworld and leave some foundation for them so that they would not decline so miserably. This would not be in vain for him to interact with the Magi. Whoosh! Whoosh! Just as Feng Zichen turned around, 2 rays of light suddenly appeared out of nowhere and flew toward him at an extremely fast speed. The speed was so fast that it seemed to be traveling through the river of time and space. It ignored all space-time and created the illusion that space-time was stagnant. The moment Feng Zichen saw them, they suddenly appeared in front of him. A powerful force suddenly attacked, forcing Feng Zichen to take a few steps back. What a powerful force! Could it be that as he retreated, Feng Zichen felt something in his heart and vaguely sensed the origins of the two? In the netherworld, there were only 2 treasures with such power, and they had not appeared in the world. There were only 2 treasures that met such conditions: the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. This was one of the few treasures in the nether realm that could retain its full strength after leaving the nether realm. It could be said that the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were the most precious treasures in the netherworld apart from the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. This was the symbol of the netherworld. After stabilizing his footsteps, Feng Zichen raised his head to look at the 2 balls of light floating in the air. The balls of light were dark purple, indicating that countless mysterious runes were flowing around them to isolate them from the outside world. Even with Feng Zichen's current cultivation, he could not see through the surface of the balls of light to investigate the situation inside. After waiting quietly for a while, he did not sense any dangerous aura. Feng Zichen tentatively used his spiritual sense to touch the 2 dark purple balls of light. Kacha! Kacha! With a shattering sound, the 2 balls of light shattered, revealing a jade book and a jade brush. They were the treasures of the netherworld, the Book of Life and Death, and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. Good. Seeing these two items, even Feng Zichen, who had seen treasures before, could not help but exclaim in surprise. The Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were both supreme-grade, connate merit numinous treasures. They were powerful and could be said to have endless uses. Although the Book of Life and Death was small, it recorded the information of all living beings in the primordial world under Daluo Jingxian. Their life and death, misfortune and fortune, their lifespan, and when they died were all recorded. This treasure not only involved the Tao of life and death, but also the Tao of fate. With this treasure, one might be able to see the mysteries of fate. It was truly unfathomable. Moreover, it was the human book of the three books of heaven, earth, and man. It had boundless luck. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was one of the top 10 connate numinous treasures of the primordial world. The Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush was also known as the Judge's Brush. Although it did not have as great a background as the Book of Life and Death, it was still extremely powerful. In the future, its name would resound throughout the three realms, causing people's expressions to change. With a stroke, it could change one's lifespan, change misfortune, and even determine life and death. This was a connate numinous treasure nurtured by the Tao of life and death. It had even fused with a portion of the concept of reincarnation, making it even more powerful. With a stroke of the brush, it could stir up the laws of life and death and achieve the effect of reversing life and death. Its power could be said to be terrifying. In particular, the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush and the Book of Life and Death were a set of Dharma treasures. When the two were combined, their power would increase exponentially. Living beings under Daluo Jingxian only needed to use the Judge's Brush to write his name in the Book of Life and Death. In an instant they would die. Even a zenith heaven golden immortal was not unkillable, as long as he captured a wisp of his aura and sent it into the Book of Life and Death. He would use the Judge's Brush to swipe fiercely. Even Daluo Jingxian would not end well. If it was light, his true spirit would be shaken, and if it was heavy, he would be severely injured. The Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush were definitely top-notch killing treasures in the primordial world. And the most terrifying thing was that he attacked in the dark. He killed without coming into contact with the dead. It was extremely sinister and impossible to guard against. In terms of this point alone, there were very few people in the primordial world who could compare to it. Even some curse-type connate numinous treasures could not compare to it in terms of silently killing people. It could be said to be the best in the primordial world. Now, such treasures were Feng Zichen's. How could it not be exciting? In the netherworld, there were only 3 people with great divine abilities: Feng Zichen, Hutu, and Taoist Mingi. Hutu was the lord of samsara and controlled the chaos treasure, the 6 paths of reincarnation. Of course, the Book of Life and Death and the Brush of Reincarnation could not be given to her. Otherwise, Hutu could really do whatever she wanted in the netherworld. As for Taoist Mingi, he was the lord of the Blood Sea and the spokesperson of the primordial killing path. He already had 5 supreme-grade numinous treasures in his hands. These 2 treasures could not be given to him. After thinking about it, only Feng Zichen, the current lord of hell and the future lord of the netherworld, was most suitable to hold the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. Therefore, this second treasure would appear in front of Feng Zichen. But, without hesitation, Feng Zichen took a step forward and took the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush. As expected, these 2 items were prepared for him. Without the slightest resistance, Feng Zichen branded them with his true spirit. With the treasures in his hands, Feng Zichen could not help but let out a hearty laugh. Previously, he was still wondering why the Book of Life and Death and the Spring and Autumn Samsara Brush had not been born after the netherworld had been born for so long? Could it be that they were not fated with him? Because of this, he was disappointed for a while. He did not expect that they did not appear because they were waiting for hell to be born. This time, Feng Zichen had fully learned his lesson from the last time. As soon as he realized that something was wrong, he used the power of the origin of the netherworld to cover up everything around him, so that outsiders could not pry into it at all. Of course, not everyone. At the very least, he could not hide it from Hutu and Taoist Mingi. These two people were also the supreme gods of the netherworld. If they did not have other important tasks, they would definitely be Feng Zichen's biggest competitors to become the Lord of the Netherworld. Because of this, Feng Zichen had not become the Lord of the Netherworld. In terms of control of the Netherworld's origin, he was not much stronger than the two of them. His cover-up naturally could not be hidden from the two of them, but this was not important. With the birth of the Netherworld, the three of them who belonged to the Netherworld naturally became an alliance. Their interests were united against the outside world. Even if they did not help him, they would not undermine him. With brisk steps, Feng Zichen arrived outside the Netherworld in the blink of an eye, where Hutu was. The moment he left the Netherworld, Feng Zichen felt a wave of discomfort. His almost invincible strength instantly disappeared. That was the strength of the Netherworld's origin. After leaving the Netherworld, of course, he could not use it. After a while, Feng Zichen adapted to the sudden drop in strength. Fellow Taoist Fengdu, you're finally willing to come out. Chapter 399. Today, fellow Taoist, you have broadened our horizons. Seeing Feng Zichen walk out of the Netherworld before he could take the initiative to speak, Hutu said exaggeratedly, Actually, it was not an exaggeration. Opening up 25 top-notch upper-class worlds in a row was something that even a saint might not be able to do, and it was done so easily as if it was effortless. This was truly shocking. Of course, these great divine abilities also knew. Feng Zichen must have used a method that they did not know. However, to be able to come up with such a method, it already proved that he was extraordinary and definitely far surpassed them. After all, the 25 upper-class worlds were placed in the Netherworld. No matter how they observed, they could not understand what method Feng Zichen had used to be able to open up those upper-class worlds so effortlessly. Of course, these great divine abilities would not know that Feng Zichen had integrated the pagoda into the origin of hell before the Netherworld appeared, preparing for today's matter. It was all for this moment to amaze the world. Think about it, opening up 18 top-class, upper-class worlds in one go. How incredible was this? To be able to do this, how extraordinary would he be? He must be a great expert that was beyond imagination. Thinking about it, even if he was not a primordial chaos expert, he was not far from it. Of course, this was only Feng Zichen's original plan. It was said that plans could not keep up with changes, and this time was no exception. With the help of the will of the Netherworld, he opened up the 6 days of Fengdu and the Hell of Fengdu in addition to the 18 levels of hell. This was great. He had gone overboard with his acting. However, looking at everyone's attitude, it was obvious that the effect was obvious. Regardless of whether he succeeded in pretending to be a peerless big shot, he had been labeled as mysterious. That was enough. Mysterious represented the unknown, represented infinite possibilities. That was the best way for him to hide his true identity. Haha. Fellow Taoist Hutu, you must be joking. That was all the power of the will of the Netherworld. Poor Wei was just taking advantage of the situation. Of course, she didn't have to spend too much effort. After thinking for a while, Feng Zichen said humbly, pushing everything onto the will of the Netherworld. Haha, fellow Taoist Fengdu is really modest. When the crowd heard this, they naturally did not believe it. If all of this was really led by the will of the nether realm, then how could Feng Zichen obtain so much merit? The heavenly Tao was fair. The amount of merit that would be bestowed would depend on the amount of contributions one had made. There was no favoritism. Based on Feng Zichen's merits, it was not difficult for them to guess his role in this matter. Naturally, they did not believe his words. No one believed him. Feng Zichen didn't explain much. What he wanted was for everyone to fill in the blanks on their own. Only his own imagination was the most invulnerable. However, there were so many people here that Feng Zichen couldn't discuss the establishment of the Yin Court with Hute. Yin Court. This was a major event that could affect the development of the primordial world. Of course, the more secretive it was, the better. It was impossible to announce it to the world. If someone with ulterior motives were to find out about this, it would be hard to avoid variables. Especially after the heavenly court found out, they would be prepared in advance. The effect of the birth of the Yin Court would undoubtedly be greatly reduced. The birth of the Yin Court required the element of surprise in order to achieve the greatest effect. Before Dijun and the others established the heavenly court, they did not publicize it. Instead, they developed it in secret. After obtaining the Tao ancestors' consent, they made it public. Feng Zichen was such a low-key person, so he would not publicize it. Therefore, he started chatting with everyone here. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a huge vibration came from the sky. Then, 6 terrifying figures descended from the sky and arrived outside the netherworld. The saints had arrived. It turned out that the 6 saints had walked around the chaos outside the sky and did not find the devil. They knew that if they continued to stay here, they would not be able to find any traces of the devil. Thus, they returned to the primordial world. However, since they had already come out, the saints could not return empty-handed. Thus, they set their sights on the netherworld. Back then, when the heaven realm appeared, the cultivation of the 6 saints was not the strongest. They were on the same level as the Khanate god-fiends. They did not have an overwhelming advantage. They were even inferior to the Eastern Emperor Tai. The demon race was powerful. In addition, the Eastern Emperor Tai suppressed the primordial world. They had their eyes on the heaven realm, so no one dared to compete with them. Even the 3 pure ones had to avoid them. Therefore, the heaven realm belonged to the demon race. Outsiders had no chance to interfere, even after becoming a saint. Now that the netherworld, which was on the same level as the heaven realm, had appeared, they naturally could not stand by and watch. They could not interfere in the heaven realm, but they could not miss the netherworld. Now was different from the past. They were already saints, the peak of the primordial world. Everything that happened in the heaven realm would never happen again. Poor Wei congratulates fellow Taoist Hutu on attaining the Tao. Retracting their auras, the 6 of them congratulated Hutu. Then they said to everyone, "Fellow Taoists, it's been a long time since we parted in the Purple Cloud Palace." After the Tao lecture in the Purple Cloud Palace ended, the former fellow disciples went their separate ways, but it was difficult for them to meet again. It was rare for them to meet again today. Even the saints could not help but sigh. Greetings, fellow Taoist Taiching, fellow Taoist Yuqing, fellow Taoist Shanqing, fellow Taoist Niwa. Everyone returned the greeting. The former fellow disciples and the current saints could not help but feel melancholy when they saw them again. Back then, they were on the same level. Now, time had passed. When they saw each other again, they were already separated by heaven and earth. In the past, when you became saints, we were not in the primordial world and did not go to congratulate you. Today, we will make up for it here. However, a great mystical ability user was ultimately a great mystical ability user. In an instant, he adjusted his mentality and even teased the Grand Pure One and the others. Congratulations, fellow Taoists, on attaining the Tao. After saying that, everyone laughed out loud. Even the Grand Pure One, who was usually indifferent, was the same. This laughter was incomparably candid, and it contained a sense of freedom. There were no schemes or tricks mixed within it. The saints had not been so relaxed for a long time. For a moment, everyone seemed to have returned to the days when they first listened to the Tao in the Purple Cloud Palace. That was a period of days without worries. Everyone only had the Tao in their hearts, and there were not many conflicts of interest. Unfortunately, everything could not go back. The past was destined to be the past. After the laughter, what was left was melancholy. Humans, they would always live in the way they hated the most. Inexplicably, everyone present was enlightened, and their state of mind actually improved slightly. Fellow Taoists, why are you here? After a moment of silence, the Lady of Earth was the first to break the silence. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone recovered from their melancholy. The past was the past. If they were obsessed with the past, how could they improve? Looking at the future was what they should do. In the blink of an eye, everyone's Tao hearts calmed down again. They began to think about the purpose of the saint's visit. Yes, the saint came here. What was his purpose? As for congratulating the Lady of Earth for achieving the Tao, naturally no one believed it. If they really wanted to congratulate the Lady of Earth for achieving the Tao, why did they do it earlier? Why didn't they come when she had just achieved the Tao? Instead, they came after nearly 1,000 years. Wasn't that clearly saying that there was something wrong with them? Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, the poor Wei saw that the netherworld had just been born and the living beings inside were extinct. She wanted to send an incarnation to guard the netherworld, impart the supreme great Tao, enlighten a place, and help the netherworld evolve living beings. The 6 of them looked at each other. No one was willing to be the first to speak. In the end, as the eldest senior brother, the Grand Pure One had no choice but to stand up and say, this, as soon as he said that, everyone present was in an uproar. How shameless! Everyone present was smart. How could they not understand what the Grand Pure One meant? They had taken a liking to the netherworld and wanted to get a share of the pie. What about imparting the supreme great Tao and enlightening a place? They were all excuses. They were already sending incarnations to stay in the netherworld. Wasn't their goal clear? Fellow Taoist Grand Pure One, what do you mean? At that moment, not only did the Lady of Earth's expression change, but even the expressions of Feng Zichen and Taoist Mingi turned ugly. Now, the 3 of them were the rulers of the netherworld. How could they tolerate outsiders spying on this place? That was the foundation of their Tao. Even if the saint wanted to touch it, they would dare to risk their lives. Stopping me from achieving the Tao is worse than killing me. It was the #1 enemy of the primordial world. If the saint's incarnation entered the netherworld, would the world still belong to them? Moreover, they did not dare to touch the heaven realm, but they dared to touch the netherworld. What did that mean? Were they looking down on the netherworld? The Grand Pure One did not say anything. Instead, he took a step forward. At the same time, the other 5 saints also took a step forward. That posture, it was obvious he wanted to use his power to suppress others. You, the Lady of Earth, are only 1 person, but we have 6 people. If you don't agree, we will fight our way in. What can you do? Fellow Taoist, are you bullying me because I'm alone? Seeing this, the Lady of Earth questioned sternly. At the same time, just as she finished speaking, the 11 ancestral magi quietly appeared and stood behind her, staring at the 6 saints together. It was as if he was standing up for her. Yes, the Lady of Earth was not alone. There were many of them, but the Lady of Earth also had many brothers and sisters. The atmosphere at the scene, immediately they became nervous. Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, now that you have lost the body of the ancestral magi and can't set up the 12 divine wraith array, you have lost your greatest reliance. If you join forces, you won't be able to stop the 6 of them from Poor Wei. Besides, Poor Wei and the others don't want to occupy the netherworld, nor do they have any intention of getting involved in the cycle of reincarnation. They just want to set up a Tao field here and wait for the future to preach the Tao. In that case, are you unwilling? Seeing that the atmosphere was getting more and more tense, as if a fight was about to break out, Nuwa could not help but step forward and say. Her tone was filled with helplessness. It was as if she did not come here on her own accord, but was forced to come by someone. Thinking about it, it made sense. Nuwa had never established a sect, nor did she take in any disciples. Back then, she had even rejected the recruitment of the demons. She did not even take one of the 9 heavens seriously. Now, for the sake of the netherworld, she did not hesitate to personally come. It was obviously abnormal. Everyone could understand why the 3 pure ones had brought Juanti here. Only Goddess and Vaiwa was here, which puzzled everyone. Chapter 400. Now, hearing the tone in Nuwa's words, everyone vaguely understood. There seemed to be a secret behind this matter, and the only thing that could make a saint helpless in the primordial world was the heavenly Tao. At this moment, everyone understood that the heavenly Tao wanted to interfere in the netherworld. Therefore, the 6 saints had no choice but to come to the netherworld to seize a portion of the control of the netherworld from the Hutu. However, the Hutu was not to be trifled with. No matter what reason the saint had, she could not let the saint step into the netherworld, let alone let him share her power, her own territory. How could she easily give it to outsiders? Moreover, she was forced to give it up by others. If this spread out, how could the Hutu have the face to stand in the primordial world? Therefore, the Hutu would never give in. Even if she had to fight with the saint, she would not hesitate. In the primordial world, sometimes, face was more important than everything. This time there was a good show to watch. With this thought in mind, everyone retreated to the side one after another, leaving enough space for both sides to silently wait for the development of the matter. Whether it was the 6 saints or the Magi, they were all figures that they could not afford to offend. If they helped either side, they would be hated by the other side. Therefore, it was better not to help either side. Anyway, this matter had nothing to do with them. You want to interfere in the netherworld with just you. He, ridiculous? Faced with the threat of Nuwa and the others, the Hutu was not only unmoved, but she also sneered and mocked the 6 of them. Today, if he retreated, wouldn't that be saying, the Hutu and the Magi were not as good as saints? This would probably be a devastating blow to the prestige of the Magi. Therefore, he could not give in. At the very least, he could not give in under the threat of the saints. Ever since they became saints, the 6 of them had never been looked down upon like this. They could not help but fly into a rage. Their expressions turned ugly, and a powerful aura rose from their bodies as they pressed towards the Hutu. Humph! With a cold snort, the 11 ancestral Magi behind the Hutu suddenly moved. Their figures crisscrossed, and Tao patterns appeared under their feet, faintly forming a powerful formation, connecting their strength together and protecting the Hutu firmly. Rumble! The pressure of the 6 saints assaulted him, and it gave rise to all sorts of phenomena. Space warped while the heavens and the earth flowed in reverse, and its might was boundlessly terrifying. However, the combined aura of the 12 grand shamans was like the divine mountain of Buzhou, suppressing and unshakable. No matter how terrifying the pressure was, it couldn't shake him in the slightest. This was the supreme divine ability, Mount Buzhou seal. This was the supreme supernatural power that the 12 ancestors of sorcery had learned from Mount Buzhou. Of course, the Mount Buzhou seal mastered by the 12 ancestors of sorcery was different from the Mount Buzhou seal mastered by Feng Zichen. Feng Zichen's Mount Buzhou seal was formed by the fusion of Mount Buzhou seal and the origin of the earth. It could barely display a trace of Mount Buzhou's divine might. However, the Mount Buzhou seal of the 12 ancestors of sorcery was different. This divine ability could be called the projection of Mount Bujo, and its power was so strong that it could even suppress the primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian. Even a saint couldn't withstand this divine ability without using the power of the heavenly way. The power of this divine ability was enough to be ranked in the top 10 of the untainted land, and was far from what Feng Zichen could compare with. This was the talent of the 12 ancestors of sorcery. The advantage of Panga's bloodline was something that Feng Zichen couldn't envy. Mount Bujo was formed by Panga's spine. The 12 ancestors of sorcery were formed by Panga's blood essence. There was a connection between the two. In addition, after the 12 ancestors of sorcery cultivated the Tao of gods and demons, they had a deeper understanding of Panga's bloodline. After that, they drew the geomancy map of the primordial world and had a clearer understanding of the primordial world and Panga's body. The accumulation of this series of insights caused the 12 ancestors of sorcery to sublimate. They used the 12 divine wraith array to deduce Panga's body and turn the Tao runes of Mount Bujo for their own use. They achieved this supreme divine ability that could be said to be invincible in the primordial world. Of course, was he really invincible in the primordial world? That might not be easy to say. However, among the suppression-type divine abilities, the Mount Bujo seal was indeed the best. This divine ability was a surprise that the 12 ancestors of sorcery had prepared for the demons. They had originally planned to use it on Tai during the decisive battle between the Magi demons and suppress him along with the Bell of Chaos. This way, the demons would not be afraid. However, they did not expect that the plan could not keep up with the changes. Under the pressure of the 6 saints, the 12 ancestors of sorcery had no choice but to reveal their trump cards in advance and use the supreme divine ability of the Mount Bujo seal to resist the pressure of the saints. Just as Niwa had said earlier, without the 12 divine wraith array, if the 12 ancestors of sorcery did not use their trump cards, they would not be a match for the 6 saints. After all, it was not 1 saint, but 6. 12 against 1, they would definitely win. However, 12 against 6, the situation was reversed. Indeed, the Hutu did not lose the body of the ancestor of sorcery as the saints had thought. However, her bloodline had been purified and was fundamentally different from the other ancestors of sorcery. She was the most perfect sorcerer. The reason why the 12 ancestors of sorcery could form the 12 divine wraith array was that they came from the same origin and had the same aura. However, now the Hutu was fundamentally different from the other ancestors of sorcery. Therefore, the Hutu could not set up the 12 divine wraith array. What a powerful divine ability! The sorcerer race actually has such a method. They've hidden it so well. In the heavenly court, Dijun and the others could not help but be excited when they saw the sorcerer race and the saints arguing because of the nether realm. No matter the outcome of this battle, the enmity between the sorcerer race and the saints had been formed. In the future, the sorcerer race would have a difficult time. This was what the demons were looking forward to. In this case, how could Dijun and the others not be happy? Unfortunately, the changes in things were often unexpected. The sorcerer tribe's sudden display of a supreme divine ability gave them a huge fright. The aura of this divine ability was exactly the same as that of Mount Bujo. It was like a projection of him, sacred and great, able to suppress everything. Even someone as strong as them could not help but feel a sense of powerlessness in the face of this divine ability. It could be seen how powerful this divine ability was. Among them, Yui Tai felt it the most. The moment he saw the seal of Mount Bujo, he had a bad feeling. It was as if this divine ability was specially prepared for him. Even the Donghuang bell, which had been unchanged since ancient times, began to tremble as if it had sensed danger. This is sudden inspiration. This divine ability is used to deal with me. Vaguely, Tai seemed to have understood something. The seal of Mount Bujo was originally prepared by the sorcerer race to deal with Tai. It was fine if he did not appear in the world. At that time, the secrets of heaven were chaotic and no one could see through it. He could not detect the sorcerer race's goal. Chapter 401. However, once he appeared, the heavenly secrets were immediately clear. He vaguely sensed the danger in advance. The change in Tai-E and the East Emperor Bell naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding people. The Magi are so scheming. Di-Jun, Tai-E, Fu-Shi, Kuin-Peng, and the others were all top figures of the primordial world. They could be said to be extremely intelligent. After thinking about it carefully and comparing it to Tai-Yi's situation, he understood the Magi's plan. His expression could not help but turn ugly, and he felt a lingering fear in his heart. If the six saints had not threatened the Magi and forced them to use their trump cards today, Tai-E would have been in danger during the battle between the Magi and the demons. There was no need to doubt the power of the Mount Bujo seal. If it was unexpected, it could definitely suppress Tai-E and the East Emperor Bell together. Even if the East Emperor's strength was heaven-defying, he would not be able to break out of the seal in a short period of time when facing the powerful Mount Bujo. In that case, without the help of the East Emperor, even if the Magi did not have Hutu, the demons would not be able to defeat the might of the Magi. Their defeat was set in stone. Fortunately, with the intervention of the saints, everything changed. The trump card of the Magi was forced to be exposed in advance. Although it was still troublesome, it was far less terrifying than before. Now that they were prepared in advance, it would be difficult for them to have an unexpected effect. This time, I have to thank the six saints. Looking at the saints below, Di-Jun sighed. That's right. At the side, everyone nodded in agreement. In this battle, regardless of whether the Magi won or the six saints won, they did not benefit as much as the demons. They were the biggest winners. When the sandpiper and the clam fought, the fishermen would benefit. The Magi summoned the projection of Mount Bujo. It was indeed beyond the expectations of the six saints. But so what? The projection was ultimately just a projection. It was not the real Mount Bujo descending. How could it block the divine might of the saints? The Grand Pure One raised his eyelids and looked at the Bujo mountain seal in surprise. Then he slowly said, "That's right. The projection of Mount Bujo? The poor Wei has underestimated the witch tribe. But do you think that the projection of Mount Bujo is enough to stop poor Wei and the others, fellow cultivator?" As he spoke, the Grand Pure One's aura grew stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, it had risen to an inconceivable level. Terrifying power swept out, distorting all concepts and denying past knowledge. The rules of heaven and earth moved according to his will, and the world was under his control. This was the Grand Pure One, the most supreme saint in the universe. With his peak fourth level chaotic essence cultivation base, he was the undisputed number one saint. At the same time, his hand shook and the primordial ultimate treasure, Taiji diagram, appeared and hung behind his head. Primordial yin and yang qi hung down, releasing a shocking pressure. After him, the other five saints also did not hold back. Their terrifying strength was released, suppressing the heavens and the earth, the past, present, and future. A supreme treasure appeared in his hand, Tao and logic interweaved, emitting resplendent light. It was as if he could unleash a world-shocking attack at any moment. "Do you think I'm afraid of you?" In the face of the six saints' coercion, the 12 ancestral sorcerers were not afraid. They raised their hands and summoned the primordial ultimate treasure, the primordial geomancy diagram. Suddenly, a miniature primordial world appeared in front of the 12 ancestral sorcerers, confronting the supreme treasure in the hands of the six saints. "Oh no, retreat!" Realizing that something was wrong, the powerful beings outside the nether realm fled outside of time and space without any hesitation. They were afraid that if they were late, they would be involved in the battle between them. Crazy! Are they going to destroy the primordial world? Is it worth it for the nether realm? Outside of time and space, everyone stopped and said worriedly. They were afraid that they would accidentally break the primordial world into pieces. Fellow Taoists, if fellow Taoist Grand Pure One and the others really start fighting later, we have to stop them even if we have to risk our lives. Otherwise, the primordial world will be in danger. After a while, the Great Void Taoist said with a serious face, Yes, you're right, fellow cultivator Great Void. We can't let them fight. Hearing that, everyone agreed. By the way, poor way, go to the heavenly court and invite fellow cultivator Tai over. His cultivation is the most profound, and he has the Khanate supreme treasure, the Donghuang bell, to protect him. With him around, it might be useful. Suddenly, someone suggested, No, the shamans and demons are irreconcilable. Fellow cultivator Tai can't wait for them to fight. If you invite him, won't you be adding to the trouble? You can't invite him over. Before anyone else could say anything, Taoist Huangling hurriedly objected. Inviting Tai over. Did they think that the situation was not tense enough and wanted to add fuel to the fire? What a brainless person. However, that person's suggestion gave the Great Void Taoist an idea. Since they wanted to invite someone, why did they have to invite the Donghuang Tai? Wouldn't it be better to invite the Taoist ancestor directly? Therefore, the Great Void Taoist hurriedly said to the person beside him, Fellow cultivator Bayu, you're the fastest among us. Therefore, I'll have to trouble you to go to the chaos beyond the heavens and ask Master from the Purple Cloud Palace. If they really start fighting, only my teacher can stop them in the untainted land. As soon as the Great Void Taoist finished speaking, a handsome young man in white, who was shrouded in coldness, said, The Great Void Taoist is right. Brother Great Void, you're right. Only Master can stop this disaster. There's no time to lose. I'll go now. This person was Taoist Bayu. His original body was an ice sculpture born in the north of the primordial world, an extremely cold place. He was formed by the Khanate cold wind and was a top Khanate god fiend in the primordial world. Unfortunately, compared to Taoist Kuanpeng, he was weaker. Therefore, he did not have the chance to become the Lord of the North Sea and missed a great opportunity. However, as a bird, although Taoist Bayu's speed could not be compared to Mingi's, it was far faster than most experts in the primordial world. It was most suitable for him to go to the chaos beyond the heavens. Screech! A white light flashed, and Taoist Bayu's figure disappeared. He had already gone to the chaos beyond the heavens. Sigh. I hope fellow cultivator Bayu can make it in time. After sighing, the Great Void Taoist continued to look outside the netherworld realm with a worried expression. Please don't fight. In theory, the heavenly Tao could be said to be omniscient and omnipotent to the primordial world. However, there were always exceptions. For the saints and the great divinities, although the heavenly Tao had the power to destroy them, it could not pry into their thoughts. For example, the heavenly Tao could not know whether the 6 saints would fight with Hutu and the others, because it could interfere with the saints' actions, but it could not affect their hearts. It had no way of knowing what the saints were thinking, nor could it deduce. This was the disadvantage of having no feelings, the complexity of the human heart. How could the heavenly Tao understand it? Therefore, at this time, Tao ancestor Hongjun needed to appear. Compared to the heavenly Tao, he understood the human heart better. Chapter 402. With Tao ancestor Hongjun around. The two sides would definitely not fight. Therefore, when the Grand Pure One unleashed his full strength, Tao ancestor Hongjun had already arrived. He quietly hid in the dark and watched the development of the situation. Otherwise, it would be too late to wait for Taoist Biyu to go to the Purple Cloud Palace and invite him over. At this moment, outside the Netherworld, it could be said that they had gathered the primordial world. The strongest power, 7 saints, 11 top-notch great divine abilities for connate cardinal treasures, and 14 top-notch connate spirit treasures. It was the battle between the liches and demons. Its power was only SOSO, right? It was no wonder that those great divine abilities ran away without looking back when they saw that they were about to fight. Looking at this situation, who would dare to stay where they were? If they were not careful, they would be blasted into pieces and returned to the origin of the world. Fellow Taoist Hutu, are you going to let me? Or not? With the Taiji painting above his head, the Grand Pure One issued a final ultimatum. Next, if the Hutus still did not agree, she was afraid that they would have to fight today. Empress, open the gates of hell and let them in. If we really enter the netherworld with the 6 paths of reincarnation disc, so what if the saints come? What waves can they cause? Just as the Hutu was about to retaliate, Feng Zichen suddenly sent a voice transmission to her. As the Lord of Samsara, the Hutu was an invincible existence in the netherworld. As long as the saints entered the netherworld, this matter would be considered over. However, Feng Zichen waited and waited, but he did not see the Hutu let anyone into the netherworld. Instead, he confronted her outside. This time he was anxious. Are you stupid? Hutu, are you stupid? It was clearly a matter that could be easily resolved. Why did it become like this? He felt helpless. Feng Zichen could only remind her. Hearing this, the Hutu could not help but be slightly stunned. That's right. Why did she have to fight with the 6 saints here? The nether realm, that was his territory. Over there, she was an invincible existence. As long as the saints entered, wouldn't they be at her mercy? He's really out of his mind. Thinking of this, Hutu couldn't help but laugh self-deprecatingly. She was so angry that she actually gave up on her biggest advantage and competed with him at a complete disadvantage. Then, Hutu gave up the idea of fighting with the 6 sages and put away her magical power. The prehistoric geomancy map once again disappeared into the void, and the seal of Mount Bujo also slowly disappeared. Fellow Taoists, you wish to preach in the netherworld. All right then, Hutu couldn't ask for more. With that said, Hutu smiled faintly and waved her hand to open the gate of hell. Then, she stepped aside and opened a path. Fellow Taoists, please. His tone was full of urgency and urging, as if he was worried that they would not come. His attitude changed so quickly that it left everyone dumbfounded. Hutu's sudden change not only stunned the 6 saints, but also the onlookers who were watching from the sidelines. Earlier, they had wanted to fight to the death. Why did Hutu suddenly give in? Moreover, she gave in so much that she almost gave the nether realm away. There was a trap. There was definitely a trap. For a moment, everyone fell into deep suspicion. This, Hutu suddenly became so straightforward that the 6 saints couldn't help but hesitate. They were afraid that there was a trap and didn't dare to go forward easily. Why? When I asked you to come in, you insisted on coming in. Now that I've let you in, you're hesitating instead. What does this mean? Are you afraid? Seeing that the 6 saints didn't move for a long time, the smile on Hutu's face disappeared. Instead, she mocked them with a mocking expression. You, after being humiliated like this, the heavenly lord of primordial beginning was immediately furious. He raised the Panga banner and was about to hit Hutu. Fellow Taoist Yu Qing, please stop. Seeing that Hutu had taken a step back and made things turn around, he didn't expect that the heavenly lord of primordial beginning would suddenly raise the Panga banner. This wouldn't do. If he struck out with this strike, this battle would have to be fought. Therefore, the great divinities moved. They walked out of space and time. They stood in front of the 6 saints, separating them from the ancestral magi. Fellow Taoist, this matter has passed. You want to preach the Tao, and fellow Taoist Hutu has agreed. She even took the initiative to open the gate of the netherworld. It can be said that she has made the biggest concession. Even so, you still want to do that? Could it be that you want fellow Taoist Hutu to take the initiative to offer the origin of the netherworld before you are willing to give up? In front of the Grand Pure One, the great void Taoist said with some displeasure, the saint had gone too far in this matter. Even these great divinities couldn't stand it anymore. They couldn't help but come forward to make peace. And who was the great void Taoist? He was a powerful person who could cultivate to the great perfection of the sage-to-be realm by relying on his own hard work. He even touched a trace of the true essence of the primordial chaos Tao realm. One could tell that his background was not inferior to the three pure ones and the others. This kind of person was not far from the legendary primordial chaos Daluo Jinxian realm. Perhaps one day, when the opportunity came, it would be done. Therefore, his attitude, even the Grand Pure One had to pay attention to it. Even if they didn't care about his attitude, the weight of the great divinities present was enough to move them. They were the 3,000 guests of the mortal world. Among the many connate god-fiends of the primordial world, the 3,000 top ones all had the aura of primordial chaos. If they offended all of them, they would be in big trouble in the future. Fellow Taoist, please calm down. We were too rash. The Grand Pure One took back the Taiji painting and apologized. Fellow Taoist Hutu, Poor Wei and the others have offended you today. Please forgive us. After speaking to everyone, the Grand Pure One said to the Hutu apologetically, Humph. Fellow Taoist Grand Pure One, is there anything else? If there's nothing else, then leave. The netherworld is too small to accommodate great gods like you. With a cold snort, the Hutu began to chase them away. Originally, becoming a saint was a joyous occasion, but they had ruined it. How could the Hutu not be angry? Fellow Taoist Hutu, what do you want for you to agree to let Poor Wei and the others preach the Tao in the netherworld? As if he didn't hear the Hutu's words, the Grand Pure One continued to ask. Obviously, he had not given up on the netherworld. This was a mission given to them by the heavenly Tao. If they could not complete it, who knew what would happen? Therefore, even if there was a slight possibility, the Grand Pure One was unwilling to give up. Originally, the birth of the 6 paths of reincarnation should have evolved according to the will of the heavenly Tao. However, with the interference of Pango's will, everything had nothing to do with him. The heavenly Tao was completely excluded. The number 1 treasure in the primordial world had nothing to do with the heavenly Tao. That was fine. After all, Pango had interfered. However, as the netherworld, which was the death world of the primordial world, was not under his control, this was intolerable. Therefore, no matter what, he wanted to get involved in the netherworld and put the netherworld under his sight. Chapter 403. Conditions. No, the entrance to the netherworld is there. If you want to enter, the Hutu will definitely not stop you. Pointing at the open gate of hell, the Hutu said indifferently, Fellow Taoist Hutu, stop joking. If you don't agree, the Poor Wei and the others will never dare to step into the netherworld. Shaking his head helplessly, the Grand Pure One replied with a bitter smile. Outside the netherworld, the 6 of them joined forces. The Hutu was definitely no match for them. However, if they entered the netherworld, it would be the complete opposite. They were definitely no match for the Hutu. Therefore, this netherworld, they could not enter. Then there's nothing I can do. The Hutu understood that the heavenly Tao entering the netherworld was a general trend. It could not be stopped. Even the tunnel would not stop it, because the heavenly Tao was the true controller of the primordial world. As a part of the primordial world, the netherworld naturally could not escape the control of the heavenly Tao. This was the inevitable outcome. Even if the Hutu did not agree now, it would definitely happen in the future. Therefore, her resistance at this moment was actually meaningless. However, the Hutu was naturally unwilling to let the saint interfere just like that. Therefore, she planned to stop the saint appropriately so that she could gain some benefits from it to make up for her losses. Since she could not stop the general trend, she would think of a way to gain some benefits. This was not too much. It was what she should do. She could not let the Hutu suffer, right? But she did not expect that the saint would be so domineering. After coming to the netherworld, he directly forced the Hutu with a tough attitude. It was as if he would suppress her if she did not agree. How could the Hutu tolerate it? No matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to tolerate it. Therefore, the Hutu was angry. He didn't care about the plan anymore. He just went head-on with the sage. Now, in the hearts of the 6 saints, they were also filled with regret. The reason why they were so strong was that they did not want to pay an excessive price. They planned to use forceful methods to force the Hutu to agree. This way, they would save a lot of benefits. But who knew that they were strong, and the Hutu was even stronger? She looked like she was going to fight to the death. Tao ancestor Hong Jun, who was hiding in the dark, could not help but shake his head when he saw this. It was originally a simple matter that could be solved by paying a price, but because of their greed, it became complicated. Now, even if they wanted to take a step back, Hutu would not easily agree. Otherwise, if word of this got out, wouldn't people say that Hutu was afraid of the 6 saints? This was a great humiliation in the untainted land. Anyone who cared about their reputation would not tolerate it. Therefore, if he didn't give Hutu a way out to save her face, there was no possibility of success. However, even so, Tao ancestor Hong Jun understood the Grand Pure One and the others. If the heavenly Tao wanted to interfere in the netherworld, he could have just given Hutu some benefits, but he did not. He insisted on having the saints step forward and bear the price for him. This was a pretty good plan. The benefits were his, while the losses were the saints'. He had obtained the nether realm without paying anything. However, saints were not to be trifled with. If they really listened to the heavenly Tao, there would not be so much chaos in the primordial world. In addition, the things of the saints did not fall from the sky. They would definitely not be willing to contribute to the heavenly Tao for free. Therefore, this matter was naturally messed up. Sigh. In the end, I still have to do it myself. Tao ancestor Hong Jun sighed helplessly and decided to do it himself. Although he had long guessed that the saints were unreliable, Hong Jun did not expect them to be so unreliable. Just looking at the series of actions of the 6 saints, not only did they not solve the problem, they even made the problem more complicated. Tao ancestor Hong Jun had reason to suspect that the 6 saints did it on purpose. Otherwise, how could they be so stupid? He knew his disciples very well. They were all smart people, and each of them was more scheming than the other. They would never do such a stupid thing. However, none of this was important. What was important was to solve the problem in front of him. Buzz. Tao ancestor Hong Jun took out the creation jade disc and connected it to the heavenly Tao. From the endless future, he looked for a chance to break the situation. Since the heavenly Tao entering the netherworld was the general trend, there was naturally a corresponding condition to promote this process. What Tao ancestor Hong Jun was doing now was to find this condition. In a trance, Tao ancestor Hong Jun saw a figure. It was the person who broke the situation. This person, he was somewhat familiar. It was his grand disciple, the 9 heavens immortal venerables, Xianqing. I see. Tao ancestor Hong Jun understood in his heart. He pointed at the Grand Pure One and gave him a hint. It was better for the saint to appear. That's Xianqing. Why is he here? The Grand Pure One glanced from the corner of his eye and actually saw Xianqing's figure in the netherworld. He could not help but be shocked. When did he run in? It was when Hutu turned into reincarnation. In order to freeload off the merit of reincarnation, Xianqing used the white lotus of purification to help Hutu purify the sea of blood and awaken her. After that, he never left. The sea of blood was swallowed by the netherworld, so he naturally appeared in the netherworld. It was just that he was too weak and was ignored by everyone. Now, the Grand Pure One had obtained the help of Tao ancestor Hongjun and accidentally discovered him. Xianqing, why are you here? The Grand Pure One asked directly with doubts in his heart. Huh? Xianqing? He's here too? As soon as the Grand Pure One finished speaking, Xianqing immediately became the focus of attention, attracting everyone's attention. Hiss! Being stared at by so many great divine abilities, Xianqing felt uncomfortable all over. To be honest, among all the people present, he was the weakest, the lowest, and the lowest in seniority. Those great divine abilities were all big shots of the celestial sect of wonders. According to seniority, they were all his uncle masters. At this moment, Xianqing felt that he was extremely humble. It was too miserable. Reporting to Uncle Master! Bracing himself, Xianqing stood up and told him what had happened previously. Haha, good, that's great. After hearing Xianqing's words, the Grand Pure One suddenly laughed out loud. He had already thought of a solution. Fellow Taoist Hutu, Poor Wei's disciple-nephew is fated with the netherworld. Therefore, Poor Wei and the others plan to help disciple-nephew Xianqing set up a courtyard in the netherworld to teach the great Tao of the celestial sect of wonders. I hope fellow Taoist Hutu can help. As he spoke, the Grand Pure One bowed to the Hutu. He really did not expect that Xianqing would actually contribute when the Hutu turned into reincarnation. This was a huge favor. With this as a breakthrough point and a price to pay, it was difficult for the Hutu not to agree. Moreover, even if this matter was spread out, the Hutu would agree to teach them in the netherworld in order to return the favor. It was not that she was afraid of the 6 saints and was forced to agree. Chapter 404. When he heard this, he couldn't help but hesitate in his heart. Even her attitude was not as firm as before. Originally, according to her plan, no matter what the saint said, she would not agree. However, when it came to Xianqing, this matter was different. The Lady of Earth had not forgotten that it was Xianqing who activated the white lotus of purification. Only then could she comprehend the meaning of reincarnation from the destruction of the lotus. It could be said that she had transformed into reincarnation. She had been enlightened by Xianqing. That was a huge favor. If Xianqing wanted to establish a Tao orthodoxy in the netherworld, the Lady of Earth would not be able to refuse. It was precisely because he thought of this that the Grand Pure One said that he wanted to use Xianqing's name to preach in the netherworld. In this way, the Lady of Earth could neither agree nor disagree. She could not help but fall into a dilemma. If she agreed, she would definitely feel uncomfortable. If she did not agree, how could she repay the karma she owed Xianqing? Fellow Taoist Lady of Earth, if you agree to this, the Poor Wei and the others will each owe you a favor. Just as the Lady of Earth was in a dilemma, the Grand Pure One continued to speak. It was the Grand Pure One who saw the Lady of Earth's hesitation and thought that there was a chance. He hurriedly promised great benefits and did not hesitate to use a favor as the price to exchange for her consent. The favor of a saint, how precious was that? That was equivalent to 6 wishes. As long as it did not exceed their abilities, regardless of whether it was reasonable or not, they could not refuse. They had to satisfy it. If these 6 favors landed in the Lady of Earth's hands, She could completely rely on them to ask the saint to do 6 things for her unconditionally as long as it was within her abilities. From this, it could be seen that in order to get the Lady of Earth to agree to them preaching in the Netherworld Saint, the saint had also put in a lot of effort. Sure. However, I am indebted to Xianqing. He can preach in the Netherworld, but you can't. He knew that at this point he had no reason to refuse. He might as well stop while he was ahead. Hence, the Lady of Earth nodded in agreement. At the same time, in order to prevent the saint from causing trouble, she added a restriction. Sure. It was not easy to get the Lady of Earth to agree. Facing her request, the Grand Pure One did not disagree. He smiled and nodded. As long as he could plant a nail in the Netherworld and give the heavenly Tao a reason to interfere, everything would be fine. As for whether or not the nails were them, that was not important. Xianqing was speechless when he saw the few of them decide his future with just a few words. Looking at their attitude, they completely treated him, the person involved, as if he didn't exist. WOC, can't you ask for his opinion? He was standing right next to her. Even if he couldn't make the decision, it wouldn't be difficult to pretend to ask for his opinion, right? That's true. In front of the elders, there was no room for Xianqing to speak. He just needed to listen to the arrangements. Xianqing disciple, after a discussion with your 2 uncle masters and 3 uncle masters, we've decided to let you build an alternative residence in the Netherworld realm so that you can impart the supreme Tao of Xianmen and enlighten everyone. If that's the case, are you willing? In the end, it was Tong Tian who felt sorry for his disciple. He turned his head and asked Xianqing, "This disciple is willing. For the celestial sect of wonders, I will go through fire and water without hesitation." Without the slightest hesitation, Xianqing said righteously. This was related to the plan of the heavenly axiom and had been negotiated by the 6 sages. How could Xianqing refuse? Wasn't that courting death? Did he still want to survive in the primordial world? Moreover, the sage was not asking for Xianqing's opinion. Instead, he was informing him in advance so that he could be prepared and not be flustered. Therefore, Xianqing could not refuse, nor did he dare to refuse. Moreover, preaching in the Netherworld was beneficial to Xianqing, other than being forced by others. There was nothing wrong with it. Since that was the case, there was no reason for him to refuse. Since he could not refuse, he might as well act more straightforwardly to gain everyone's favor. All right, only by being so responsible can you live up to the name of the Celestial Venerables of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Sure enough, seeing Xianqing's attitude, the 6 sages nodded in satisfaction. Xianqing, take this item and open up a pure land in the Netherworld as the foundation for preaching. He took out a ball of heaven and earth origin. With a wave of his hand, the Grand Pure One sent it into the hands of Xianqing in the Netherworld. Immediately after, the other 5 sages also took out a ball of heaven and earth origin and sent it to Xianqing. Preaching in the Netherworld was the collective mission of the 6 sages. Naturally, it was impossible for the Grand Pure One to do it alone. All of the losses should be shared by everyone. Heaven and earth origin, the true foundation of the primordial world. It was more precious and miraculous than the Xianhuang merit. It could help people become Daluo Jinxian, evolve the world, and also give birth to innate god fiends. It had incredible uses. Even if the sages wanted to condense such a treasure, they would not be able to condense it without 10,000 years. The ball of heaven and earth origin in Xianqing's hands was the result of the sages' accumulation for countless years. Even if they took it out, their hearts would ache. Evolving the world. Xianqing muttered to himself as he merged the 6 balls of heaven and earth origin in front of him into one. The 6 sages gave him the heaven and earth origin so that he could evolve a completely different upper-class world in the Netherworld. a world that belonged to the living. That's right, this was the sage's goal. The extreme of death was life. Opening up the world of life in the death realm was in accordance with this principle. There were great opportunities, great luck, and great creation. It had indescribable benefits for preaching in the future. Open. Thinking of the legends of the later generations, Xianqing used his magic power to activate the heaven and earth origin and began to evolve the world. Suddenly, a terrifying power spread. Endless light erupted and endless laws were born, covering everything. Nothing could be seen. After 100 years, the violent fluctuations finally stopped, and the endless light also faded. An upper-class world with endless vitality surrounded by green light gradually appeared in the netherworld and appeared in front of everyone. The Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. It was the name of this world, and it was also the residence of the Eastern Green Flower Emperor. Xianqing used this as the foundation to evolve this world. Rumble. The Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy was born, and there was a sudden change in the netherworld. Boundless, deathly aura was boiling, and it caused huge waves. Vitality was born from the deathly aura and rushed toward the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. Qinghua, in the first place, had the meaning of life. Now, a world full of vitality suddenly appeared in the netherworld. It was very eye-catching in the vast, deathly aura. Naturally, it caused the vitality hidden in the deathly aura to resonate and gather toward the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. Rumble. Violent changes occurred in the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. The vitality became more and more intense, and countless strange flowers and plants were born. It released all kinds of strange phenomena. And at the bottom of the Azure Flower World, the newly born spiritual soil also began to mutate after absorbing a large amount of vitality. It released a green treasure light. Countless Tao patterns were born, and the essence of vitality rolled out, shaking the surroundings. Hiss, what rich essence of vitality! It's not an exaggeration to say that this world is the world of life. Outside the netherworld, even the knowledgeable, powerful beings were shocked by this tyrannical fluctuation of vitality. They had seen many upper-class worlds. As long as they were willing to spend some time, they could even create an upper-class world that was not inferior to the Azure Flower World. However, it was the first time they had seen a world like the Azure Flower World of Perpetual Joy that was completely composed of vitality, and they could not create it. This was the world of life in the death realm. Just like the Yang pole and the Yin fish, it was the truth of heaven and earth. It could be encountered, but not sought. It was formed by various coincidences, and it was a supreme opportunity. It was too difficult to replicate, because in the primordial world there was no longer a netherworld. The heaven realm and the netherworld. They were both unique. Boom! At this moment, a sudden change occurred. The vitality that spread out finally attracted the rebound of the death aura. The vast death aura surged and surged towards the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy. Although the Eastern Green Flower World of Perpetual Joy was large, compared to the netherworld, it was like a wave in the sea. It could not be compared at all. In an instant, it was drowned by the surging death aura. If it were not for the vitality that still emerged from the netherworld and constantly merged into the Azure Flower World to fight against the death aura, the entire Azure Flower World would have been swallowed by the death aura. But even so, the Azure Flower World was still in danger. How could those strands of vitality compare to the boundless aura of death? It was just a dying struggle. It would not be long before the Azure Flower World became history and completely merged into the death aura. This was the calamity of the world, or rather, the calamity of splitting the sky. It was a calamity that belonged to the world. The birth of every world, while containing great fortune and great opportunities, was often accompanied by great calamities. Not to mention a world like the Azure Flower World, which was completely composed of vitality, must be extremely heaven-defying. The power of the calamity of the world that it triggered was also terrifying and astonishing. The riot of the netherworld's death aura was his calamity. If he passed it, he would survive. If he couldn't pass it, he would be destroyed. This is too strong. Seeing the boundless death aura, Xianqing clicked his tongue in fear. If he had not seen something wrong and had avoided far away the moment the death aura erupted, he would probably have ended up like the azure flower world, struggling in the death aura. Purifying White Lotus go. Although he was afraid, the eastern green flower world of perpetual joy was related to the scheme of the heavenly Tao and his future path. He could not give up. He had to think of a way to help it survive the calamity of the world. Therefore, after some thought, Xianqing took out the 12th grade Purifying White Lotus. This was the strongest magic treasure on him, and at the same time, it was his strongest method. If it was useless, he really had no other way. However, Xianqing knew very well that he would not fail. The so-called calamity of the world was just a formality. It was scary but not dangerous. The eastern green flower world of perpetual joy was born according to the will of the heavenly Tao. It was his method to interfere with the netherworld. If this world was destroyed, all the previous efforts of the heavenly Tao would be in vain. If that was the case, how could the heavenly Tao allow it? The birth of this world was inevitable. Xianqing obeyed the orders of the heavens. How could he fail? Chapter 405. After the White Lotus of Purification left Xianqing, it expanded with the wind. In the blink of an eye, it became 10,000 feet in size. Its entire body emitted a white glow as it spun. It broke through layers of deathly aura and landed in the world of everlasting joy of the East, taking root in its origin. Boom! The origin of the greater world was extremely powerful. Even the weakest one was stronger than Daluo Jinxian. Not to mention, for a top-tier greater world like the world of everlasting joy of the East, its origin was definitely not weaker than the great Abhijna. Hence, under the influence of the world's origin, the power of the grade 12 White Lotus of Purification was completely unleashed. The light of purification swept out like flowing water, enveloping everything. As a result, the surrounding space was illuminated into a vast expanse of whiteness. Sizzle, with the protection of the White Lotus of Purification, the world of everlasting joy of the East stabilized instantly. The deathly aura came into contact with it again. Before it could get close, it was purified by the light of purification that enveloped it. The White Lotus of Purification could purify all the filthy aura in the world. The deathly aura was also a type of filthy aura. It could not escape its purification. After the deathly aura was purified, it turned into the purest origin aura and integrated into the growing world of everlasting joy of the East to accelerate its evolution. This was also one of the abilities of the White Lotus of Purification. Otherwise, why would it be called one of the 10 great primordial spiritual treasures of the primordial world? Very good. As expected of the celestial sect of wonders. In the dark, Elder Hongjun saw this scene and nodded his head in satisfaction. This grand disciple was much more reliable than the sages. It was all thanks to him that they were able to complete the task entrusted by the heavenly axiom. If not for him, it would be troublesome this time. Reward. Great reward. Thinking of Xianqing's contributions, Elder Hongjun made a decision in his heart. He was going to record his contributions and reward him well. As the leader of the celestial sect of wonders, he naturally had to treat those who contributed well so that the disciples of the celestial sect of wonders would not be disappointed. Let the poor way see what is fated with you. Elder Hongjuan's heart skipped a beat. Endless heavenly secrets appeared and surged in his sea of consciousness. Everything related to Xianqing appeared. The best was not the most suitable, but the most suitable was definitely the best. As the number one god of the primordial world, Hong Jun naturally understood that. Therefore, he wanted to know everything about Xianqing so that he could choose the most suitable treasure for Xianqing. Luckily, Pangu covered up all the secrets of heaven on Fengzichen, including his connection with Xianqing. Dao, ancestor Hongjun, was the strongest, but he couldn't compare to Pangu, so he couldn't see through him. This allowed Feng Zichen to escape a calamity. Green lotus of creation? This kid is so lucky. In just an instant, ancestor Hongjun learned everything that Xianqing had experienced and understood what he needed the most now. The four-sided lotus platform. The innate 5 elements flag. With these 9 top-notch Khanate merit numinous treasures, he managed to nurture the 36-grade green lotus of creation. However, it was a pity that he would never be able to gather all 9 innate merit spiritual treasures. Heavenly Tao. He would not let the rank 36 creation green lotus appear in the great desolate Aeon. However, a Khanate treasure level green lotus of creation can exist. It won't touch the bottom line of the Heavenly Tao. This kid's idea is very good. Xianqing wanted to collect the origins of the 9 Khanate spirit treasures and use them to grow the green lotus of creation. Naturally, he couldn't hide it from Hongjun. Regarding this, he expressed his agreement. If it was done properly, it might be possible to cultivate a Khanate treasure level green lotus of creation. However, this method was too difficult. Forget it. After all, he is the grand disciple of Poor Wei, and he has contributed to the celestial sect of wonders. Poor Wei will help him. As for whether it succeeds or not, it all depends on his own luck. He remembered that he didn't give him any gifts when he entered the sect of Xianqing. In addition, he had made a great contribution to the celestial sect of wonders today. Dao ancestor Hong Jun made a decision in his heart. He planned to combine the 2 rewards and give Xianqing a great creation. I'll give you this western white cloud-bound flag. It's not in vain for you to call Poor Wei Grandmaster. Dao ancestor Hong Jun waved his hand and took out a white flag. There were cloud patterns embroidered on it, and it was surrounded by Khanate Genjinchi. It was the western white cloud-bound flag of the Khanate 5-element flags. It was a supreme grade Khanate merit spirit treasure, one of the 10 great Khanate spirit treasures of the primordial world. This treasure should have been given to the Jade Pool Golden Mother by Dao ancestor Hongjun after the witch demon calamity. It should have turned into the immortal gathering flag and was one of the treasures of the heavenly courts. However, from what he meant just now, he clearly wanted to give this item to Xianqing to help him cultivate the green lotus of creation. History had really changed. Go. With a casual toss, Dao ancestor Hongjun threw the western white cloud-bound flag out. It turned into a stream of light and broke through layers of void, flying to Xianqing. What is it? Xianqing, who was paying attention to the changes in the eastern Qinghua world of Chang'e, suddenly saw a stream of light flash in front of him. He subconsciously reached out to grab it. This is the western white cloud-bound flag. The stream of light immediately turned into a small white flag. Xianqing glanced at it and felt that it was very familiar. After thinking carefully for a while, he could not help but exclaim. He had already come into contact with 3 of the Khanate 5-element flags. Naturally, he was no stranger to their aura. How could he not recognize the origin of the small flag in his hand? It was the western white cloud-bound flag that he had no hope for. This treasure was in the hands of Dao ancestor Hongjun. Xianqing could not come into contact with it at all, let alone extract a wisp of Khanate origin. However, what was unexpected was that Xianqing had already given up hope. This treasure actually appeared in his hands on its own initiative. What a pleasant surprise! Grand disciple Xianqing thanks the ancestral master. After putting away the western white cloud-bound flag, Xianqing hurriedly bowed to the void. It was obvious that this treasure must have been given to him by Tao ancestor Hongjun. It should be a reward for his actions this time. There's no need to thank me. You deserve it. Before Xianqing could bow, a voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Even so, Xianqing still insisted on bowing. Seeing this, Tao ancestor Hongjun did not stop him. After waiting for a while, Xianqing relaxed when he did not hear any sound. I've really earned a lot today. Touching the treasure flag in his hand, Xianqing still could not hide the excitement in his heart. The green lotus of creation was about to be formed. It's just that this item is the supreme treasure of the heavenly court. If I take it, will I be tainted with karma? In the end, thinking of the significance of this treasure in the future, Xianqing could not help but be a little worried. The immortal gathering flag. As the name implied, he knew the function of this treasure. There was definitely a great karma. But immediately he seemed to have thought of something and put it behind his mind. This treasure was given to him by Tao ancestor Hongjun. Even if there was any karma, it should be counted on him. What did it have to do with him? Moreover, as the Tao ancestor of the celestial sect of wonders, the #1 expert in the world, the most ancient living being of the primordial world, he would not cheat a junior and give him a problematic spirit treasure, right? Chapter 406. Hongjun was now a Tao ancestor. He was no longer the top, great medium of the primitive world. His status was obviously different. He wouldn't do the same thing as before, right? No, absolutely not. After cheering himself up, Xianqing turned his attention back to the eastern Qinghua Chengel world. At this point, he could only believe in the character of Tao ancestor Hongjun. After all, if the Tao ancestor really wanted to cheat him, he had no other choice but to accept it silently. The gap in strength was too big. With the protection of the pure white lotus, the eastern Qinghua Chengel world gradually gained a foothold in the netherworld. Not only did the death aura not do anything to him, but it also became the nourishment for his evolution. Very good. However, it's not enough. Nodding his head, Xianqing was very satisfied with the performance of the pure white lotus. But he was not satisfied with the evolution of the Qinghua Chengel world. Unlike the 18 levels of hell, this was a greater 1,000 world that he opened up on his own. Therefore, it was not supported by the will of the netherworld. There were all kinds of difficulties in opening it up. It was not as fast as the 18 levels of hell. Even with the help of the origin of heaven and earth, it was still the same. Go. With a thought, Xianqing took out the white cloud boundary flag and waved it at the boundless death aura. Whoosh! Suddenly, a bright white light bloomed, and the Khanate Gunjin Qi surged out. One after another, it crushed the death aura that was rushing toward the Qinghua Chengel world. After the death aura was crushed, it was directly absorbed and purified by the pure white lotus. It saved the time of entanglement, and the speed of the Qinghua Chengel world's development was greatly accelerated. It's useful. Seeing this, Xianqing's eyes lit up. He simply threw the white cloud boundary flag into the Qinghua Chengel world and let him and the pure white lotus work together. Boom, boom, boom! The 12th grade pure white lotus and the white cloud boundary flag met, and the two seemed to have reached a resonance. The power suddenly increased, and a dazzling light burst out. The terrifying power spread and covered everything. Under this power, the arrogant death aura completely became the nourishment for the growth of the Qinghua Chengel world, and it could no longer cause any harm. At this time, with the right time, place, and people, it is the best time for the green lotus of creation to appear. If I miss this opportunity, who knows when I'll have to wait for the next one? Taking out the green lotus of good fortune, Xianqing had a strong premonition that it was time for the green lotus of good fortune to appear. They had arrived. Among the 4 innate great lotus platforms, Xianqing only lacked the innate origin of the grade 12 red lotus of hellfire. Among the innate five-element flags, the only thing he lacked was the innate origin of the northern Xianyuan water control flag. These two treasures were in the hands of Taoist Mingi, and Taoist Styx was in the nether realm, not far from him. At this moment, if Xianqing were to ask Taoist Mingi for Air Bao's congenital origin in the name of developing the Qinghua Chang'e world, he would definitely not refuse, because he was Taoist Styx River. He had once heard of it in the Purple Cloud Palace. No matter what he thought, he was still a disciple of the celestial sect of wonders in the untainted land. This was the birth of the Qinghua Everlasting Joy Realm, and it was related to the celestial sect's plan. There was no way that Taoist Mingi could refuse. Previously, when the six saints and the Lady of Earth were fighting, it was understandable that he did not help. Now, this was something that he could do in passing. If he were to refuse, it would be equivalent to cutting himself off from the celestial sect of wonders. The six saints would definitely have a grudge against him. In this way, as long as Taoist Mingi was not stupid, he would know how to choose. The witch race was different from the demon race. They really had nothing to do with the celestial sect of wonders. Among the 12 ancestral witches, other than Ancestral, which Hutu who had been there once, the rest had never been there. Uncle Master Mingi, Xianqing would like to ask for 2 treasures from you to help the Qinghua Chang'e world evolve. I hope you can fulfill my request. Holding the green lotus of good fortune in his hand, Xianqing bowed to Taoist Mingi and said, if he wanted to ask for help, he had to have the attitude of asking for help. Xianqing was well aware of this. Sai, take it. Seeing the green lotus of good fortune, Taoist Mingi felt that the secrets of heaven were clear. Without Xianqing saying anything, he knew what Xianqing wanted. After struggling for a while, Taoist Mingi took out a lotus seed of the red lotus of fire and threw it to Xianqing together with the congenital origin of the northern mystic water control flag. He was not afraid of offending 1 or 2 saints, but offending 6 at the same time, even the East Emperor Tai had to think twice. He, Mingi, naturally did not dare to. Therefore, he could not refuse Xianqing's request. They're finally here. After receiving the red lotus of fire and the congenital origin, Xianqing's face could not help but reveal an ecstatic expression. He had gathered one of the congenital origins of the 9 treasures of good fortune. The green lotus of good fortune could finally be born. This was all thanks to Pangu. If Pangu had not made a move and prevented the heavenly Tao from interfering with the netherworld, it would not have borrowed Xianqing's hand to evolve the Qinghua Chang'e world. And the birth of the green lotus of good fortune could speed up the birth of the Qinghua Chang'e world. In this way, even if the heavenly Tao did not like the green lotus of good fortune, in order to control the netherworld, it had to be born and would not send down the heavenly punishment. This was called the right time. The eastern Qinghua Chang'e world was a boundless world composed of boundless vitality. It gathered most of the vitality of the netherworld. It could be said to be the holy land of spiritual root living beings. It was most suitable for the growth of the green lotus of good fortune. This was called the right place. The Tao ancestor came in person. The 6 saints came together, and the great magicians of the celestial sect gathered. This was called the harmony of people. All these things added together made it the best time for the green lotus of good fortune to be born. If he missed this time, it would be difficult for him to encounter a second time in his life. Thank you, Uncle Master Mingi. I will definitely repay you generously in the future for helping me. After calming down from the ecstasy, Xianqing thanked Taoist Mingi. Just based on Taoist Mingi's actions today, if Xianqing had great achievements in the future and the Buddhist sect schemed against Taoist Mingi, he would definitely help to repay today's kindness. You're welcome. It's all for the celestial sect of wonders. Taoist Mingi waved his hand and replied expressionlessly. This was really for the celestial sect of wonders. If it wasn't for the celestial sect of wonders, he wouldn't have given the red lotus seed and the congenital origin to others. As for the generous repayment that Xianqing mentioned, Taoist Mingi didn't care at all. If it was his master, the Grand Master of Heaven, who said it, it would be fine. He was just a junior. What ability could he have? Hee. Xianqing smiled and didn't say anything. He had roughly guessed what Taoist Mingi meant. But so what? Everything would be revealed in the future. Go. Xianqing formed a Tao seal and sent the green lotus of good fortune and the origin of the 9 treasures of good fortune that he had collected earlier into the eastern Qinghua Chengel world, so that they could fuse there. Buzz, buzz, buzz! Sensing the aura of the same origin on the green lotus of good fortune, the white lotus of purification and the white cloud-bound flag trembled inexplicably and released wisps of origin that gathered towards him. Chapter 407. In the depths of the eastern world of everlasting joy, a 9-colored brilliance bloomed. The creation chi surged, and the laws of great Tao filled the air. It was abnormally mystical. That was the phenomenon caused by the growth of the creation green lotus. An extraordinary object would definitely have an extraordinary appearance. Needless to say, the creation green lotus was extraordinary. Even though it was only a connate numinous treasure, it still had boundless power. Even heaven and earth had to celebrate its rebirth. The 9-colored light was formed by the origins of the 4 connate lotus platforms and the connate 5 elements flag. It enveloped the creation green lotus and deduced the origin of creation. It explained the true meaning of the great Tao and helped it take root. Before long, the connate origins of the creation 9 treasures were completely absorbed by the creation green lotus. As for the creation green lotus, it also grew into a lotus flower. A green lotus flower. That was the creation green lotus. The 3 treasures. No, one of the 4 chaos cardinal treasures, the creation green lotus. It was the cardinal treasure in Panga's hands, and also the strongest spirit root in the world. It was even stronger than the world tree. However, the grade 36 creation green lotus was completely destroyed. Even if it could be reproduced, it was not something that Xianqing could do now. Therefore, the creation green lotus that was born from the creation green lotus was only grade 12. It was a supreme grade connate numinous treasure, and not even a connate cardinal treasure. It was of the same level as the other 4 lotus platforms and was not much stronger. A supreme grade connate numinous treasure. In that case, it's not beyond my expectations. Looking at the grade 12 creation green lotus in front of him, Xianqing had already guessed it. However, he could not help but be disappointed when he saw it for himself. The creation 9 treasures that Xianqing obtained was not the main body after all. It was a connate origin, and its power was limited. It was already very good that it could nurture a grade 12 creation green lotus. However, humans were often dissatisfied. They always hoped for the best and not the best. When the results deviated from the expectations in one's heart, disappointment was inevitable. However, in the blink of an eye, Xianqing adjusted his mentality and destroyed the disappointment in his heart. The grade 12 creation green lotus was already very good. In the primordial world, there were only a few that could be compared to it. It was second only to connate cardinal treasures. Moreover, it didn't matter if it wasn't a connate cardinal treasure. He still had the 12th grade pure white lotus and the western white cloud-bound flag. As long as it swallowed the 2 supreme grade connate spirit treasures and combined the power of the 3 supreme grade connate spirit treasures, the 12th grade green lotus of creation would naturally be upgraded to a connate cardinal treasure. If that was the case, why should he be disappointed? The creation green lotus was destined to become a connate cardinal treasure, and all the conditions were met. The only thing he lacked was the right timing. Once the time was right, he would succeed. Unfortunately, this was not the time to upgrade the green lotus of creation. The heavenly Tao could tolerate the existence of a supreme grade, connate numinous treasure green lotus of creation, but it might not be able to tolerate the existence of a connate cardinal treasure green lotus of creation. Referring to the predecessor of the green lotus of creation, it was split by the three pure ones. Therefore, Xianqing decided not to advance under the eyes of the heavenly Tao to avoid unnecessary trouble. One day, he would find an opportunity to head to the great chaos outer realm. Only then would it be safe to advance there. After all, the outer realm was the true home of the green lotus of creation. Only there could he receive the best treatment. If he stayed in the primordial world, he would only be endlessly feared by the heavenly Tao. He would be in danger of being destroyed at any time. Moreover, referring to the chaos bead, he had completed his advancement in the great chaos outer realm and become a chaos numinous treasure, not a connate cardinal treasure. The green lotus of creation, which was in the same situation as him, should be able to receive the same treatment. Compared to a connate cardinal treasure, a chaos numinous treasure was still stronger. It was not strength in terms of power, but strength in essence. The evolution of the great Tao was the process of going from simple to complicated. As time passed, the great Tao would become more and more complicated and produce endless mysteries. But at the same time, it would also become more and more difficult to comprehend. Therefore, the closer it was to the initial era, the simpler the great Tao rules were. The closer it was to the essence of the great Tao, the easier it was to comprehend. A chaos numinous treasure appeared before a connate cardinal treasure. It was definitely older than a connate cardinal treasure and closer to the essence of the great Tao. Xianqing expressed that he did not know who was stronger between the two and did not dare to make a judgment. However, he knew one thing. Under the same talent, a person with a chaos numinous treasure would definitely cultivate faster than a person with a connate cardinal treasure. One was close to the essence of the great Tao, while the other was on the surface of the great Tao. The difference was extremely obvious. The older, the more powerful. It was not a joke. At the end of the realm, all divine abilities, magic treasures, and magic powers were useless. What was competing was one's control of the great Tao. At this time, the advantage of ancient living beings was reflected. They were closer to the essence of the great Tao than the living beings born later. Naturally, their cultivation was faster. This was the reason why connate god fiends were far less powerful than chaos fiend gods. Born a generation later, he missed out on too much. The later they were born, the more difficult it was to cultivate. The Tao at the beginning was one it was naturally easy to comprehend. After that, Tao was 2, 3 in all things. The difficulty of cultivation could be imagined. The birth of the green lotus of creation was celebrated by heaven and earth, and all kinds of phenomena were born. Above the 9 heavens, there was auspicious aura descending. Under the ground, golden light surged out. Together, it surged towards the green lotus of creation. This was the blessing of heaven and earth to the green lotus of creation. The green lotus of creation had contributed greatly to the birth of the primordial world. Now that it had been reborn, boundless benefits would naturally descend. In a place where no one could notice, the heaven-opening luck that dissipated between heaven and earth slowly waved towards the green lotus of creation and blessed it. Such a change could be hidden from others, but it could not be hidden from Xianqing. Seeing this, he was naturally overjoyed. The more heaven-opening luck, the greater the hope of attaining the Tao. How could he not be happy? However, while he was happy, he could not help but feel worried. There was a limit to the heaven-opening luck. How much luck could there be that dissipated between heaven and earth back then? Most of the heaven-opening luck was still left on some heaven-opening artifacts. In addition to absorbing the heaven-opening luck that dissipated between heaven and earth, the green lotus of creation could also absorb the heaven-opening luck of others. For example, the connate 4 great lotus platforms, the connate 5 element flags. These connate spirit treasures formed from the fragments of the green lotus of creation. The heaven-opening luck originally belonged to the green lotus of creation. It was only after it shattered that it was scattered on these connate spirit treasures. But now the green lotus of creation was reborn, so the heaven-opening luck naturally had to be taken back. It was just that its level was too low now, and the heaven-opening luck it could absorb was limited. That was why it did not attract the attention of others. However, once the green lotus of creation advanced, it could accommodate more heaven-opening luck. The owners of those treasures of creation were not fools. Naturally, they would find the reason why the luck of the treasures of creation disappeared for no reason. With their intelligence, they would definitely not be able to hide it. Sooner or later, they would find the green lotus of creation. Chapter 408. When that time comes, Xianqing was in big trouble. Thinking about the owners of the 9 treasures of destiny, one would know how terrifying this force was. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it could overturn the primordial world. Therefore, if the creation green lotus wanted to advance into a chaos spiritual treasure, it had to be planned at length. Rumble. Not to mention how complicated Xianqing's heart was. After the birth of the green lotus of creation, the heavenly Tao rhyme came one after another and integrated into his body. At the same time, the world of everlasting joy of the Eastern Qinghua also gained some benefits from this and completely evolved. The world was completely enveloped by green light, and it was dazzling and resplendent. Moreover, it was suffused with boundless vitality and emanated the aura of creation. This green light was the light of creation. The birth of the green lotus of creation had given the green lotus of creation many benefits. The transformation of endless life force into the light of creation was one of them. Following the birth of the viridian everlasting joy realm, the nether realm underwent another change. The entire realm was filled with an aura of perfection, and the laws of heaven and earth were abnormally active. He was even more perfect. Is it done? This unforeseen event awakened Xianqing from his absent-mindedness. He looked at the green splendor world of perpetual joy once again. Who could truly control the future? It was better to grasp the present as best as possible. There was no point in thinking too much about the matter of the good fortune azure lotus. It was better to think about it when Shao Qin became stronger in the future. Go. Putting aside his worries, Xianqing took a step forward and arrived at the Qinghua everlasting joy realm. Qing. His eyes were full of bruises. It was a boundless green, as expected of the green splendor everlasting music world. This world was green in color. Xianqing looked around, and all he could see was green without any other colors. The mountains were green, the water was green, the earth was green, and even the sun was green. It was extremely miraculous. They were all formed from the aura of creation. Every blade of grass and every tree in this world had the power of creation. If placed in the outside world, they could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. It could be said to be extremely precious. However, in the Qinghua everlasting joy realm, it had become an ordinary item. This showed how extraordinary this realm was. 10 directions, pure land. Seeing this, Xianqing thought of another name for the Qinghua everlasting music realm in the future. The 10 directions, pure land, rebirth as one wishes. This was the holy land of the mortal world after death. By coming here, one would be able to transcend. The Tai, Heavenly Lord of Salvation for Misery, was also known as Heavenly Lord of 10 Directions. This was where the name of the 10 Directions, Pure Land, came from. However, although this place was called the Pure Land, it had nothing to do with Buddhism at all. It was a proper Taoist holy land. The Buddhist Pure Land of Bliss was located in the Western Pure Land of Bliss, not in the Netherworld. Although the purpose of the two was similar, they were indeed two different places. As for who brought it up first, Xianqing had no idea. It was unknown whether Taoism copied Buddhism or Buddhism copied Taoism. Anyway, in the future, it was already very serious for two companies to plagiarize each other. Arriving at the center of the realm, Xianqing saw the 9-colored light enveloping the green lotus of good fortune. He smiled and walked up. Heavenly Tao above. Today's Xian sect's disciple, Xianqing, has established a world in the netherworld, the Eastern Qinghua world of everlasting joy. I want to use this place to guide the souls of the dead to the afterlife, so that those ghosts who have no one to rely on will not suffer from hunger and cold. For those who have accumulated merit, done good deeds, understood the Tao, and achieved great merit, the Poor Way wants to personally guide them, ride the lotus platform of purification, scatter the auspicious light of 100 treasures, and help them ascend to immortality, attain the Tao, and transcend life and death. As soon as he finished speaking, merit descended. Bright golden light descended from the sky and completely enveloped Xianqing. It was as if he was wearing a layer of golden clothes. It was abnormally gorgeous. There wasn't much merit, not even 1,000th of the reincarnation merit. But the meaning it represented was extremely extraordinary. That heavenly Tao above opened the curtain of everything, marking the official entry of the heavenly Tao into the netherworld. Otherwise, why would the heavenly Tao bear witness to the world that belonged to the underworld? Not bad. Xianqing is indeed blessed. In the outside world, the saints saw Xianqing's performance and couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. This time, their mission was considered completed. They didn't have to worry about the punishment of the heavenly Tao anymore. It was just that they owed Hutu a favor, which was more troublesome. As for the rest, they were all within their acceptable range. However, the 6 saints were already very satisfied with this. The price they had to pay this time was much less than expected. Rumble. One could see that the power of the heavenly Tao entered the netherworld along with the power of merit and then spread to the entire world, fusing with the rules of heaven and earth. From then on, the heavenly Tao had taken root in the netherworld. Although it couldn't completely control the netherworld, it could still interfere a little. Moreover, everything that happened in this world could be investigated by it. The only thing that wasn't affected by the heavenly Tao was the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. 6 fellow Taoists. In this case, are you satisfied? After everything was settled, Huda looked at the 6 of them and said coldly, "Fellow Taoist Hutu, please calm down. Poor Wei and the others promise that if there's nothing important in the future, they won't step into the netherworld." Since their goal had been achieved, the 6 saints' attitude towards Huda softened as they said with a smile. In any case, it didn't mean much to them whether they came to the netherworld or not. The 6 saints wouldn't lose anything by saying some soft words to Huda to calm her anger. Humph. In that case, then please go back, fellow Taoists. With a cold snort, Huda sent them off. It was really infuriating to see them. Since everything was over, it was better to send them away as soon as possible so that they wouldn't be an eyesore here. Fellow Taoist Hutu, Poor Wei and the others will take their leave first. After cupping their fists, the figures of the 6 saints gradually disappeared and left this place. In fact, there was no need for Hutu to speak. They were about to leave. Did they really think that the saints wanted to come here? Here. They sensed the long-lost danger. Although it sounded unbelievable, it really happened. Therefore, if it weren't for the heavenly Tao forcing them, they would never have approached this place. This place made them uneasy, causing them to lose the ability to control everything. Fellow Taoist Hutu, after disturbing you for so long, Poor Wei and the others should leave. After the 6 saints left, The great beings also bid farewell to Hutu. This dispute, after a long time, was started by the celestial sect of wonders. After understanding all of this, these disciples of the celestial sect of wonders didn't have the face to continue staying here. They only wanted to leave as soon as possible. Sigh, this matter has nothing to do with you, fellow Taoists. After sighing, Huta said with understanding. She knew that although these people were disciples of the celestial sect of wonders in name, that was all they could do. They couldn't be the master of any celestial sect of wonders. In the end, they have no face. Fellow Taoist Hutu will go now. We'll meet again if fate allows. With a helpless smile, everyone left one after another. After this departure, I'm afraid that we won't meet again for many years. Looking at the backs of everyone leaving, not only Hutu, but even Dijun, Tai, the six saints, and the great beings who had been famous for a long time in the primordial world were a little absent-minded. Chapter 409. These people were all people who lived in seclusion. If nothing unexpected happened, after returning this time, they would no longer be seen in the primordial world. They would not step into the mortal world and pursue the Tao wholeheartedly. Fellow Taoists have a safe journey. Everyone was speechless. They sent out their most sincere blessings in their hearts and watched them leave. As for Xian Qing, no one paid attention to him. Poor him, he was completely forgotten. He stayed in the eastern Qinghua realm alone. Fellow Taoist, are you free now? I have something to discuss with you. After everyone left, Feng Zichen walked to Huta's side and said softly, "What's the matter?" Huta looked at him in surprise and asked, "It's not convenient here. Let's talk elsewhere." Looking at the sky, Feng Zichen hinted. The sky? Frowning, Huta looked at the sky and instantly reacted. Feng Zichen was hinting at the heavenly Tao. Then this matter was definitely not ordinary. It was an important matter. If not, why would he hide it from the heavenly Tao? All right then, let's go to the 6 paths of reincarnation disc and talk. After thinking for a while, Huta pointed at the 6 paths of reincarnation disc and said, the only thing she could think of that could hide from the heavenly Tao's perception, other than Panga's Hall, was the 6 paths of reincarnation disc. Okay, nodding, Feng Zichen expressed that he understood. Brother, I have something to discuss with fellow Taoist Fengdu. Please go to the netherworld and wait for a while. We will be back soon. Turning around, Hutu said to the group of ancestral magi apologetically, It's fine. Sister, go ahead. We haven't had the time to take a good look at the birth of the netherworld. We can take this opportunity to walk around the netherworld, see what's the difference between it and the heaven realm. Shaking his head, Dijiang replied indifferently. What he said made sense. The netherworld was the world that Pangu had prepared for the Magi. It was also one of the escape routes for the Magi. Of course, he had to understand it well. Yes, brother, I'll go first. Seeing that he was right, Huda didn't say anything more and walked directly to the 6 paths of reincarnation. Greetings, fellow Taoist Dijiang. After greeting Dijiang, Fengdu quickly followed Hutu. Who is he? Why does he give me a familiar feeling? Could it be that I know him? Looking at Fengdu's back, Dijiang frowned. He felt that he should know Fengdu, but he couldn't remember who Fengdu was. It had to be said that Dijiang's spiritual sense was really strong. However, Feng Zichen's incarnation had undergone the baptism of reincarnation. As long as he did not take the initiative to expose himself, it would be difficult for outsiders to discover his true origin. Forget it. I won't think about it anymore. When Huta comes back, we'll ask her directly. After thinking for a long time, Dijiang still couldn't figure it out. He simply stopped thinking about it and planned to ask Huta directly later. After that, he brought the other ancestral magi and strolled around the netherworld. On the other side, Fengdu walked silently behind the Lady of Earth constantly organizing his words in his heart, intending to persuade her to set up the Yin court. Now that everyone had left, it was time to bring up the matter of establishing the Yin court. Fengdu and the Lady of Earth discussed the matter of the Yin court for the time being. On the other hand, Feng Zichen had been in a state of excitement ever since he obtained the origin of the tunnel. When everything in the netherworld was over, he directly left Fengdu's incarnation to guard this place. He couldn't wait to leave this place and return to the ancestral land of the human race. He wanted to refine the origin of the tunnel. That was the great Taoist priests. Daluo Jingxian was invincible. The great Taoist priests who had become primordial Daluo Jingxian in the primordial world. Who could resist his temptation? Feng Zichen didn't know about others, but he definitely couldn't, especially since he was only a line away from the great Taoist priests. It could be said that he was within reach. That was even more impossible to endure. After refining the origin of the tunnel in his hand, he would be the great Taoist priests. Thinking about it was really exciting. Fengdu has already bloomed the flower of the tunnel. As the original body, I can't fall behind. After teasing himself, Feng Zichen took out the origin of the tunnel and directly refined it. This origin of the tunnel was not prepared for him. Instead, it was forcefully taken by the Lady of Earth. It was not compatible with his aura. Naturally, the refinement was not as smooth as the previous two. It even caused a strong resistance from the origin of the tunnel. Boom, boom, boom. The true will of all things surged out from the origin of the tunnel and transformed into various forms. It contended with Feng Zichen's mana and prevented him from refining it. That wasn't all. The origin of the tunnel rumbled and resonated with the mountains, rivers, and earth. It stirred up the power of the earth and headed toward Feng Zichen. For a moment, Feng Zichen felt that his body was incomparably heavy. It was as if he was carrying an ancient divine mountain on his back. It was so heavy that he couldn't breathe. Even with Feng Zichen's cultivation, he was still pressed down. It could be seen how heavy it was. Humph! A mere origin of the tunnel actually wants to defy the heavens and escape my suppression. What a joke! Great Tao furnace, refine for me. Feng Zichen couldn't help but be furious that he couldn't refine the origin of the tunnel. He directly summoned the great Tao furnace and stored it inside, using the power of the great Tao to refine it. Compared to the power of the great Tao, the origin of the tunnel was much weaker. Therefore, even if the power of the great Tao possessed by the great Tao furnace only had a trace of the true power of the great Tao, it was definitely not something that the origin of the tunnel could contend against. In the great Tao furnace, the arrogant origin of the tunnel was completely suppressed by the power of the great Tao. Traces of the origin were refined and merged into Feng Zichen's body. However, as he watched, Feng Zichen discovered a drawback of the great Tao furnace. That was, there was no corresponding Tao fire. If there was a furnace, there naturally had to be a fire. Even the Grand Pure One had to use the connate 8 trigrams furnace to refine pills with the purple Tusita fire. Of course, the great Tao furnace also needed a matching Tao fire. In the past, when the great Tao furnace was still the heaven and earth furnace, Feng Zichen used the fire of all creations. This was a variant of the star fire. Because the star fire was too eye-catching, Feng Zichen didn't dare to use it. He was afraid that it would attract the attention of the demons. So he changed it into the fire of all creations. Of course, the power of this fire was very powerful. It was not inferior to the 10 great primordial true fires. It was more than enough when paired with the heaven and earth furnace. However, the heaven and earth furnace had been upgraded and became the great Tao furnace. As a result, the fire of all creations was not compatible and could not fully unleash the full power of the great Tao furnace. This also led to the fact that although the great Tao furnace could suppress the origin of the tunnel, its refining speed was a little slow. Sigh. I was negligent. It wasn't too late to discover it now, but he couldn't make it in time to refine the origin of the tunnel. It took time to deduce a connate true fire, especially the connate true fire that was suitable for the great Tao furnace. It was even more difficult to deduce. The great Tao was born in the chaos, so the most suitable great Tao furnace was naturally the legendary chaos true fire. The flame that was born in the chaos was one of the most ancient flames. It could be said to be the source of fire, and its power was beyond imagination. Chapter 410. This kind of flame was so powerful that it could be called the most powerful flame in the primordial world. It was even stronger than the 10 great primordial true fires. It was naturally difficult to deduce and had all kinds of restrictions. To be honest, with Feng Zichen's current cultivation, the possibility of refining this flame was extremely small. If not for the chaos bead, a supreme treasure related to the origin of chaos, he would never dare to deduce the flame of chaos. Because of this, fire was not something from the primordial world, but something from the chaos. It was almost impossible for it to appear in the world. It was only because Feng Zichen had the chaos bead that he dared to have such a bold idea. Go. With a thought, Feng Zichen took out the chaos bead and took out a wisp of the origin of chaos. He activated the power of the Tao of fire and ignited it. Immediately, the origin of chaos turned into a ball of gray flames and burned towards the great Tao furnace. This was the flame of chaos. It looked ordinary, but it had great power. Wherever it passed, the void was destroyed and the laws were shattered, turning back into the state of chaos. One could see its power. At this time, although Feng Zichen had not cultivated the flame of chaos, a supreme divine power, he could still use it with the help of the chaos bead, igniting the origin of chaos with the Tao of fire. Even if it was not the flame of chaos, it was not far away. Rumble. The flame of chaos fell into the great Tao furnace, and the speed of refining the origin of the Tao immediately accelerated. The connate qi in Feng Zichen's body kept jumping, as if a flower was about to bloom. However, at this moment, Feng Zichen's attention was not on the origin of the Tao at all. Instead, it was focused on the flame of chaos. Countless runes flowed in his eyes, evolving into all kinds of miraculous things. They turned into 2 beams of divine light and entered the flame of chaos to pry into its Tao and truth. Obviously, he planned to take this opportunity to comprehend a trace of the great Tao from this ball of flame of chaos and lay the foundation for creating the supreme flame of chaos in the future. The more powerful the divine ability, the more difficult it was to create and the higher the realm required. Although Feng Zichen's cultivation was not high, he could accumulate his foundation in advance. When his cultivation reached a certain level, he could evolve the divine ability in one fell swoop. This was to plan for the future. Just like that, time slowly passed. Pooh! One day, Feng Zichen suddenly felt a throbbing and hurriedly woke up from his Tao comprehension. Looking up, he saw that the Taoist flower had bloomed. 3 flowers at one's prominence and 5 qis collecting. This was the symbol of Daluo Jinxian's perfection. At this moment, Feng Zichen had finally stepped into the realm of Daluo Jinxian. Furthermore, his 3 flowers, they were different from the other 3 flowers. It was a true flower of Tao. Each flower bloomed with 12 grades, and they were all a noble purple color. They contained the power of heaven, earth, and man. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The moment the 3 flowers were formed, a certain condition seemed to have been met, and they resonated. From the unseen and untraceable place, a supreme force was directed into Feng Zichen's body. Yes, in an instant, Feng Zichen felt that he was different. It was as if he had undergone a huge change, but he could not tell exactly what the change was. Puzzled, he raised his head to take a look. Phew, what is that? When he raised his head, Feng Zichen was shocked. He saw that above the 9 heavens, a purple-gold Tao will had suddenly appeared and was slowly rotating. So round, So perfect! Looking at the purple-gold Tao wheel, Feng Zichen seemed to be shocked and could not help but praise it. That purple-gold Tao wheel was too perfect. It was so perfect that nothing in this world could compare to it. It was as if everything in front of him had all kinds of flaws. That was the reason why Feng Zichen was amazed. He had seen many treasures, but none of them gave him such a perfect feeling like the Tao wheel in front of him. Even the chaos bead could not compare to it. Feng Zichen had only felt a similar feeling from Pangu. That meant that this item was infinitely close to Pangu. What was even more amazing was that there were countless runes on the Tao wheel that covered the entire wheel. It was extremely mysterious. Just looking at it would make one feel dizzy. Feng Zichen only took a slight glance and felt as if his head had exploded. Countless chaotic information filled his mind, making him feel extremely uncomfortable. He quickly closed his eyes and did not dare to look again. That was extremely unbelievable. What realm was Feng Zichen at now? Daluo Jinxian had reached perfection. It could be said to be the pinnacle of the Tao. At such a realm, what runes could he not comprehend? Even the supreme great magic, the connate Tao scripture, and the saints' classics were placed in front of him. Although he could not comprehend it at a glance, it was not difficult to understand its meaning. But even so, the innate runes on the wheel, not to mention understanding its meaning, just looking at it made him feel confused. He did not understand its meaning at all, and even felt dizzy. This meant that the level of the purple gold wheel had surpassed that of a saint. It was an endless, mysterious treasure that completely exceeded Feng Zichen's understanding. That was why he could not pry into it. Outside the innate runes, there were endless rules. They were like patterns that were imprinted on the edge of the purple gold wheel. The rules of heaven and earth were extremely similar to the rules that formed the primitive world, but they were more profound. It was like their origin, making Feng Zichen unable to see through them. After looking at it for a long time, he even felt a sense of dizziness. It was even more serious than the after effects of looking at the innate runes just now. After a while, Feng Zichen calmed down the restlessness in his mind and continued to look at the purple gold wheel. However, with the previous lesson, he did not dare to look at the runes and rules on it again. Instead, he looked elsewhere. This time, Feng Zichen saw silk threads, countless silk threads. Those silk threads came from nowhere and stretched out from the void. They were densely packed and tightly wrapped around the wheel, and as the wheel rotated, they became tighter and tighter. These silk threads were different from the rule runes and did not have the slightest bit of magic. Feng Zichen looked at them for a long time and did not feel uncomfortable. He continued to look at them, wanting to see their origin. At first, he did not feel anything strange. But after looking at them for a long time, he did not discover their origin and found that something was wrong. It was fine that the silk threads were entangled deeper and deeper. But as the silk threads were entangled deeper and deeper with the wheel, it began to affect the speed of its rotation. It was as if there was a huge monster at the end of the silk threads that firmly held the wheel and did not let it continue to rotate. Although this effect was very small and almost undetectable, and if not for Feng Zichen's careful observation, he would not have discovered it, but it did affect the rotation of the wheel. Perhaps he could not see anything now, but as time passed, there would be more and more silk threads firmly wrapped around the wheel, bringing him great pressure. Chapter 411. This pressure would become stronger and stronger. First, it would continuously slow down the speed of the Tao wheel. In the end, it would even completely drag the Tao wheel, causing it to completely stop spinning and stand quietly in the void. Then, something big would happen in the primordial world. At this point, how could Feng Zichen not understand the origin of the purple gold Tao wheel? It was clearly the true ruler of the primordial world, the supreme heavenly Tao. That's right, in the primordial world, only the three Taos of heaven, earth and man could be so magical and powerful, far surpassing the saints and directly comparable to Pangu. This purple gold Tao will existed above the 9 heavens, in the deepest part of the boundless void. Its origin was self-evident. Good boy! If the heavenly Tao stops operating, the primordial world will be exciting. I'm afraid that the primordial world will be destroyed and immeasurable calamity will descend soon. Feng Zichen frowned and looked at the heavenly Tao. He thought with some fear. The heavenly Tao slowly rotated. It was clearly a sign of operating the world and pushing the laws. If it completely stopped, it would be terrible. There would not be a big problem in the primordial world. However, whenever the world reached the end, the heavenly Tao would be the first to sense it. It would be affected and stop operating. Therefore, if the heavenly Tao stopped operating, it would be the arrival of the immeasurable calamity and the precursor to the destruction of the world. That thread is... Looking at the thread, Feng Zichen frowned tightly. He wanted to see its origin and solve this problem for the heavenly Tao. No one could stand idly by when they saw such a major matter that concerned the survival of the primordial world. Moreover, he was a promising young man. Furthermore, he had the heavy responsibility of Pangu on him. It was even more impossible for him to ignore it. Unfortunately, even the heavenly Tao could not solve it. It was even more impossible for Feng Zichen. After looking carefully for a while, he still did not find any useful information. Khanate 8 trigrams. For some reason, a thought flashed through Feng Zichen's mind. He used the supreme mystical ability passed down by Fuxi. The Khanate 8 trigrams was the foundation of Fuxi's Tao. At the same time, it was also the pillar of the primordial world. Its power was naturally top-notch. Just in terms of deduction alone, the innate 8 trigrams was enough to rank in the top 3, not to mention that it had other functions. The shadow of the innate 8 trigrams appeared in Feng Zichen's eyes. Heaven and earth changed greatly, and the universe was transformed. The secrets of the threads were gradually revealed in front of him. Yes, it actually worked. The ability of the pre-celestial 8 trigrams was somewhat beyond Feng Zichen's expectations, but it made him a little excited. Originally, he only had a flash of inspiration and wanted to give it a try. He did not know whether it would succeed or not. Who would have thought that it would actually work? This was truly a huge surprise. The 3 flowers at one's prominence had caused great changes in Feng Zichen, but the specific changes were somewhat inexplicable and required him to figure it out himself. Seeing the heavenly Tao was one of them. This was the second reason why the power of the divine ability would be increased. Yes, that's right. After Feng Zichen cultivated the 3 flowers at one's prominence, the power of the divine ability had increased by an entire realm, and his understanding of the Great Path had also increased by a level. Otherwise, with his current mastery of the pre-celestial 8 trigrams, it would be impossible for him to deduce the origin of the threads. But now he had easily done it without much effort. It had to be said that this was the benefit of forming the 3 flowers of heaven, earth, and man. Karma. That's reasonable. Withdrawing his divine ability, Feng Zichen was a little absent-minded. That thread was the thread of karma. It was the karma of all living beings that firmly entangled the heavenly path, pulling it and preventing it from continuing to operate. Sigh, this is troublesome. After understanding the origin of the threads, Feng Zichen could not help but have a headache. He had no way of dealing with this matter. Previously, he did not know the origin of the threads. Seeing that they were harmful to the heavenly path, Feng Zichen was extremely nervous and wished that he could leave and burn those threads. But now, after understanding that the threads were the threads of karma, the nervousness in Feng Zichen's heart disappeared. He was not as worried as before. He just felt that it was a little troublesome. The heavenly path would clean up the threads of karma on its own, so he did not have to worry about it. When the heavenly path felt that the existence of the threads of karma affected its operation, It would trigger the calamity of heaven and earth and clean up the primordial world. It would clean up the karma that was entangled with it in one go. This was the origin of the calamity of heaven and earth. There was too much karma accumulated between heaven and earth, and it had already hindered the operation of the heavenly path. In order to protect itself, the heavenly path triggered the calamity to clean up everything. This was completely understandable. Karma came from all living beings. This sin should naturally be borne by all living beings. Only in this way could the justice of the heavenly path be demonstrated. In fact, triggering the calamity and cleaning up the primordial world was also a method that the heavenly path had no choice but to do. If someone could clear up all the karma that was entangled in the heavenly path and let it operate steadily, there would naturally be no more calamity in the primordial world. However, that was completely impossible. The karma of a world was huge and complicated. They were connected to each other and entangled with each other. There was no clue at all. It was impossible to clear them up. Even an existence like the heavenly path that had no intelligence and was completely programmed could not be sorted out, let alone sentient beings. If not for that, the heavenly path would not have sent down a killing tribulation to clean up a portion of the living beings of the primordial world and cut off the messy karma. That was the simplest and fastest method. It would also cause the least damage to heaven and earth. However, there was no perfect method in the world. There were still loopholes in this method. Not all karma could be cut off quickly. Some karma was like poison that was attached to the bones. It was firmly entangled in the heavenly path and could not be removed no matter what. Previously, it had been said that the heavenly path could sacrifice everything for the primordial world. Among them, there was no lack of people who had contributed to the world. Not only that, those with merit would definitely be protected by the heavenly path. If these people died, it would be on the heavenly path. Even the Panga would form karma, let alone the heavenly path. If these people died, the heavenly path would naturally be entangled in karma and could not be removed. In that case, there was quite a lot of karma on the heavenly path. It was easy to end the karma of all living beings. It was fine as long as they all died. However, how could the karma of the heavenly path be ended? Naturally, he had to let the heavenly Tao die to end everything. As time passed, the karma would accumulate and the heavenly Tao would not be able to remove it. When it could not withstand the weight of the karma, the heavenly Tao would stop operating. In that case, the immeasurable calamity would arrive. The calamity was the sin of all living beings. It was the retribution given to all living beings by the heavenly Tao. The immeasurable calamity was the sin of the heavenly Tao. It was the retribution given to the heavenly Tao by those who had died. The heavenly Tao could not withstand the weight of karma. It would naturally collapse. In that case, the world would be destroyed and all karma would be cleared. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.